Pum, pum, pum. So we had this thing it's recording. We are supposed to do this a while ago. Let's wrap this up. I heard an amazing story last night. Believe it or not, I got the blessing of reading for hours with a friend of mine over the phone. None of it recorded. So I, I'm indefatigable. I'm insatiable. This gives me energy rather than takes it away, and it's a lot of fun. But he shared with me some really interesting stories, and one of them would be worth talking about briefly because what we're going to do today is wrap up those two videos that are the sort of the start of our um, Plutarch series, Lycurgus and Numa. And there we go. Let me just click a few buttons. I think you're going to have to all bear with me this morning because this is a little bit impromptu. And we're going to put some pieces together. So we read a lot of stories. We read a lot of stories by Ray Bradbury, his short stories. And he's so fun. There's something so like the joyful child in you, the joyful boy in you, actually, to be more specific, is just so happy reading those stories. And they were very pleasant. We'll have to do some readings of those sometime. But we got to read them last night, he and I, over the phone. He was working on some car stuff and lots of cool things were going on. And anyway, let me pull this up here and say, oops, wrong folder. So what we're going to do is I had this recording and I forgot to do it, which is the wrap up of Numa and Lycurgus by looking at Plutarch's comparison of Numa and Lycurgus. Numa and okay, save that there, close out of that. So we're going to read that. It's short. We've read the Lycurgus video, we've read the Numa video, but I had mentioned something at the beginning of the Lycurgus one. What is history? It's storytelling. Literature is storytelling. Well, history is storytelling with an added empirical burden upon it. That the story you're telling, you have to have some evidence that it's the evidence to support the reason that this is a story of something that actually happened. That's the difference. We said that history is not chronology. When I was in grade school, back in fourth grade, I remember that history was my least favorite subject. I hated it. I didn't understand why I was meant to memorize dates. But that's not history. History is storytelling. Stories tell us about who we are. As Rushdie says, we're the only species that tells stories about ourselves in order to understand ourselves. So, if you take literature and you take history, they're much closer to each other. History is kind of the science version. It's a little bit, it has that empirical requirement upon it, but its main thing is to tell you a story. And then when you read the story, quid ridis mutato nomine, why are you laughing at the story? All you have to do is change the names and it's about you. Quid ridis. Why are you laughing? So you get to understand yourself through the stories. And you get to, with Plutarch, one of the beautiful things is you get to read about the DNA that's in you. You get to read about that heritage that you have, your culture and civilization, which is crumbling all around you, but might be saved if you pay attention to the founding documents and the people who built it in the first place and actually pay some attention to that. You might just turn it all around with greater ease than you imagine instead of fighting endlessly on X nonsense that AI can just argue with itself over. So we're going to read these stories to understand ourselves. But so we separated chronology from history. We understand the idea of history. But the story he told me last night was a very interesting picture of that. It was a story about the power of stories. And maybe another time we'll have to read a bunch of these great Ray Bradbury stories, which it got us kicked off. And I found a book here and we started reading some short stories and it was really fun. So anyway, now what we're going to do is finish. We read Lycurgus, we read Numa. We understood the historian saying this is in a little bit of the prehistory. This is a little bit legendary, but we watched him sort out different sources and say, okay, this seems more likely something that actually happened. And this guy is the only source of all the ones I found who claimed this. And he had a reason for making that up. So we're going to, so we're watching him do history while we're getting the history. Let's do this. That'll work. And so we watched that with Lycurgus, and we watched it with Numa. And what we realized is these are not, when they say lawgivers, what we're really looking at are constitutionalists. These are people who are not just writing laws, which is great, and all the philosophy of, oh, how should the law be crafted? And all the judges who have to say, okay, that law that was crafted, it applies to 10,000 different cases that are slightly different. So we're going to pronounce our opinions on those things. And that's really most of the law that governs your life is what we call common law. But what it actually means is the collection, it means a little more than this, but it mostly means the collection of all the opinions of all the justices who don't give hypothetical opinions. They just actually have had to deal with cases. And so you've got written law, that's about 10% of the law that applies to you. But most of the law that applies to you is in precedent. It's in the legal scholars working out with real cases. Okay, what does this law mean and how is it applied in this case versus this case and so on? So we've been reading about lawgivers, but these are not just people who are doing that, which is awesome. These are founders of nations. These are George Washington types. So we get to read the history of George Washington as written by Abraham Lincoln, in a sense, because we're reading Plutarch in 75 AD, writing about 900 BC. So it was far from him, and 700 BC in the cases of Lycurgus and Numa, respectively. So what we saw were some interesting parallels. First of all, like we're going to compare them now. So because the point of this is to understand virtue, is to understand the human condition, because like literature, history as a science is in the bubble of humanities, that the point of it is to understand the human condition, know who we are, know ourselves, maybe resonate, maybe activate, like actualize things that are hidden in our DNA by looking at, like, wait a minute, that's my heritage. I'm the legacy of these people, and to turn on things that we need to have turned on in order to do the complicated cultural, civilizational, political work of making an organized society where things are thriving and everybody's happy and moving towards life in a positive way, which we seem very far from and quite close to collapse, obviously. But who knows what we could do and turn it around if we pay attention to the things that, how I used to say it, um, the the stories, the lives, the histories, the stories, the mythopoetry of the people who founded this civilization, who took rock throwing, poop throwing apes and turned them into cathedral and pyramid builders, as I keep saying. So we're going to do that. And because that's the point of this history, and Plutarch understands what history is, and great historians do. I mean, this isn't some weird theory like a chronologist is not a historian. Historians are telling you stories about yourself, about other people, about your human condition to illuminate and help you to come to an understanding of who you are and what you can do and what you should do and all of that. Because that's the point of this, he's not just giving us Lycurgus and giving us Numa, both of which are stories. He's now going to give us a comparison of the two. So before we look at his comparison, which is rather short compared to the readings we did before, why don't we talk about what we've seen? Oh, you know what? I forgot to do this. I'm going to add a link here. I knew there were things I was forgetting. If you're watching this on X, which is the only place we stream it before we upload it to YouTube, I'm going to add to the comments a link where you can come and join us online, and your pretty little face can be right up here with us and we can have a conversation. You can say, I'm full of garbage, and you can bring a bunch of arguments about why I'm wrong or add an insight that I miss in the text and all sorts of good conversation. We'll have a lovely time. Um, Before we look at his comparison of the two, let us compare them ourselves. First of all, Lycurgus seems to be the greater of the two. I would very, very, very much be interested in reading an argument on the other side of that. You may have something in your DNA that resonates and understands like, no, 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 I see something here. Numa is actually greater. It seems easy to come to the conclusion, actually, that Lycurgus is greater. So it would be very interesting to hear a good argument on the other side. Here's the argument as I'm recalling it off the top of my head. Lycurgus founded a people out of a warlike, crazy, chaotic group of people. He constituted them in a way where they willingly carried on his legacy for 500 years. A week after Numa died, Rome fell apart in the sense of he's the second king, but fell apart in the sense of what he was constituting worked while he was alive. It really seemed to work. It really was a big deal. But he was like, it didn't last. As soon as he was gone, it fell into war again. As soon as he was gone, they forgot that they were supposed to be afraid of the gods and that they should be sacrificing and dedicating their, like he was very much a spiritualist, and Lycurgus was maybe more of a philosopher. He certainly understood the mythopoetic necessity. And remember, he brings Thales in, and then he leaves for 20 years and he studies law, and we'll talk about that. But he leaves and he says, Thales, just play them music till they can start to long and desire to be better ordered. Because there's no way I could write a laws for them and make a coalition with them to try to build a new people if they don't even want. They have to first want to be better ordered. So he leaves. In 20 years, he travels and studies the laws of other nations before he comes back and sets out on his project. But both of them were studious. Both of them were dedicated to virtue. Lycurgus, a little bit more philosophically, maybe. Numa, a little bit more as a spiritualist. That's not to say he didn't have brilliant philosophy. I mean, clearly they were both competent in both. These are very rare men, right? This is a rare kind of individual who can say, okay, this is how everything's going. But what if the people themselves were aimed in this direction? And what if the system was designed with the least possible influence necessary? Neither of them wrote many, many laws. They said, if I just barely write this and barely write this, then things can thrive and be awesome. And for Numa, they were till he was well into his 80s. But when he died, things fell apart. But for Lycurgus, he established something that lasted centuries. And once the corruption did start to seep in, there were even individuals. We haven't read this yet, but we can read in future passages in Plutarch. It would be as if, imagine if Donald Trump Jr. Oh, yeah, you gotta pick the son of a very wealthy, successful person inside the system, however sickly it's become, were to say, "You know what? We forgot all of the founding principles that made our nation great in the first place, and why don't I just give up everything I have, and we all just voluntarily decide to go back and live that way again, because we know it was better." And then everybody decided to do it, except they didn't. We'll get to the depressingness of trying to revive something like this. But Lycurgus is founding it. So this is 500 years earlier. He's founding this thing. And we see a lot of parallels. So there's a lot in common between Numa and Lycurgus. They're both very careful thinkers. They're both extremely studious. They're not saying, I want to get a degree by doing the minimal amount of work to get a degree. They're saying, I'm going to go become the excellent expert in this topic. I'm going to travel. I'm going to give up everything else, and I'm going to study, and I'm going to converse with people. I'm going to ask the Egyptians how they do things and how they've been doing things and how things used to be done. I'm going to go to Turkey. I'm going to go to Asia, right? That's Turkey. I'm going to travel around to the farthest reaches, and I'm going to try to really know before I go tinkering with things and try to mess around. I'm going to be careful about this. Both of them were careful. Both of them had the Apollonian pulling back of the reins, right? If you're looking for political solutions, the one mistake you can't make, and if you look at the history of the world, every tyrant who made this mistake crumbled quickly. If you want to be leaving a political legacy, if you want to be engaged in a project of statecraft that is noble and admirable and worth emulating and worth studying and reading, the first mistake you can't make is thinking the point is to prove that your project was right. The point is to serve humanity. If you think humanity exists as the raw material to prove that your experiment was so clever, you inevitably 100% for reasons that the Apollonian Daphnic story tell us explicitly, it's laid out there, will end up murdering everybody. That's the only place it can go. Why? Because the political solution is born in opposition to the fratricidal, envious, worst Cain like elements of humanity. It's born to oppose people. That's politics. The founders of the United States, government is evil, but it's necessary. It's a necessary evil. We have to have a government because there's these psychopathic killers and these people who just keep Hatfield and McCoying it and getting worse and worse with each other. We can't let people live in chaos. So we need a government to govern, to say, look, if you're governing yourselves, we wouldn't need a government. But there will always be, and this is something we don't want to eradicate. This is the hardest thing to understand. The level of subtle wisdom in these constitutionalists is we don't want to eradicate the possibility of great individual human evil. We just want to be prepared for it so we can put it in jail. But the rules we would have to make it impossible for anybody to even imagine being horribly evil and murderous and fratricidal would be worse for everybody. So we have to have enough freedom that that's a possibility. And then we have to have a government that's opposed to just that and not opposed to everything. But it's a thing that's born in opposition to humanity. So if you whip the reins instead of holding them back, as Apollo is depicted in every statue and every painting for the last thousands of years, I've looked on Google Art Project, look up the statues and pictures of Apollo. He's pulling back. Every single one of them, he's pulling back. That principle is that this thing matters. You can get supreme courts and symphonic non-lyrical music. He's got the lyre. It's not Pan's music. He's got the you walk into the symphony and your jaw hangs open and you forget to breathe. You can get those things in life if you do the Apollonian thing, but the Apollonian thing is not the main thing. There's a higher principle still. Cupid flies higher and he can bring even Apollo low. That's the point of that story. We've made a video on it actually. So you can find that. But he's not whipping the reins. Mars, maybe there's a reason for him to. Apollo must hold back the reins. And he does. His son doesn't, but he learns his lesson in that story, and he learns that no, it's not about what I'm proving, what I can do. It's about serving something greater. Now, Lycurgus and Numa are very self-restrained from the start. Hey, we'd like you to come and make laws for these people. No thanks. They're a mess. What you want me? What? I'm going to spend how much of my time caring about the problems that didn't need to exist that are generated by a bunch of people, but help them? Mm, Not a good idea. I'm gonna go pray. I'm gonna go do something else. I don't want this. I'm restraining myself, and there's a convincing to even get involved. And that's maybe even a little more extreme, if I remember correctly, in the case of Numa. But Lycurgus, it's in the text. I mean, it's in there. There's lots of hints in the story where it's very clear that Lycurgus is saying, "Oh no, I'm not just pretending to not be too eager for this great honor that you're giving me. I'm saying, no, no, that's dangerous. That's likely to go wrong, even with me in charge of it. I'm going to go spend 20 years studying and really understanding how all of this stuff works so that I can have the least possible push and just maybe things might work. I'm going to go do that first. You listen to some music. You listen to, I probably can't play some, but you listen to the fourth movement of Dvorak's New World Symphony. You imagine what it would be like to be in a harmonious community of people who are each bringing their own individual notes, but are working together towards something that they're looking at higher than them instead of selfishly working for themselves and beating each other up and desperately and scarcity and nastiness and lies and all that other horrible stuff. You imagine being better than you are for 20 years, and I'm going to go study carefully how to write laws and we'll see what happens. And then, of course, Lycurgus won't even write laws. Now, no, that's a different principle. This is pretty powerful. Lycurgus says, I want the people to be virtuous. The founders of the United States said, this will work if the people govern themselves, if the people are virtuous, if they're religious, if they're ethical. We've got a system. Why? Because the system is constitutional government. So the first step is We need something to oppose the worst elements of humanity, or nobody can trust anybody. People will renege on their contracts. There will be violence in response to that, and then met with greater violence, and things are going to get out of control. It's a necessary thing that we have government, but it's evil. It's an evil that's necessary. So we will have a constitution. Look, we will constitute the government. I'm talking about America now. These people are constituting the nature of the people themselves. Our founder said, let's constitute the government. The people will come together and say, we agree to be ruled in this way. All power is either usurped or granted. You've either stolen power over me or I've agreed to be ruled by you. And we're going to take all these people with all their freedom and power to do whatever they want, which is going to make a chaotic mess, and say, if you all decide you're going to give up a little bit of that, you're not allowed to murder. You're not allowed to kidnap. You can try to make your business more successful than your competitors, but you don't get to beat him out by shooting him in the head or kidnapping his daughter and holding her for ransom or whatever, or reneging on your contract and getting like, we're going to have some laws. So there's going to be rules. You got to give up a little bit of your freedom, but we're going to really restrict how much you can give up. We're going to restrict how much the government can do. We're going to make it as powerful as we can, but we're going to limit it to do just these things, just the things that are the stuff we really can't have a trusting society with. So, you know, the problem with the anarchists is they look at the free market and they say, this is great. This will work out wonderfully. It's like, well, you don't want the government intervening in the free market. I get that. But you also need something that allows you to be able to trust each other in the first place to have a market. And we've talked about these stories before, right? I've got a bunch of apple trees. Everybody in town knows I have a bunch of apple trees. One day I decide I want to make a bunch of money. So I go to the bar, I go to the saloon, I go into town, I go to the marketplace, I run into somebody and I say, hey, I'll give you all my apples this year, all of them for 200 bucks. Really? Great. Here you go. Then I walk down the street and I say, hey, buddy, I'll give you all my apples for 200 bucks, all of them, the whole harvest. Great. And I do that with everybody and then I skip town. Okay. Well, you could probably deal with that. Like the town could come together and just murder me, which is probably what would happen. Um, excuse me. But what would be nice is if we had a third party that didn't care about my apples and didn't care about your 200 bucks, just cared about enforcing the rules that you're not allowed to lie in a contract. And then they are allowed to have limited force. They're allowed to use force. They have a monopoly on force. They're allowed, as a third party monopolizer of force, to put me in prison, to fine me, to lock me up, to say you have to do what the judge said, or we are going to put you in prison. This has to be made right. So the government is necessary, but the government itself has to be limited in what every tyrant mistakes, and they all die quickly and they destroy everything. And it's the story of Phaeton. Everything, if you don't hold back the reins when coming to a political solution, it's very easy to say, oh, I took this thing that was born in opposition to the worst elements of humanity, and I thought it was all that mattered, and it ended up killing hundreds of millions of people. It's in the story. In fact, in that story, it says, if you forget this lesson, which we did 24 times in the last century, new fires will come into the world. And our lexicon had to incorporate new meanings or entirely invent words like nuclear fire and genocide and Holocaust in the last century because we forgot this lesson. There were people on the left or the right or both who were thinking, and both who were thinking, I've got a final solution. I know what to do. Everybody, you exist to prove my project is right, rather than having the laurel branch and remembering, no, this is a necessary evil. It exists to serve something greater. In any event, Lycurgus knows that. Numa knows that. So they don't go rushing in saying, yeah, look how clever I am. I'm going to write all the laws, everybody. They say, whoa, that's a heavy thing. I have a little peanut in my something. Get some water later. In any event, we've seen some parallels, but we saw that Lycurgus and Numa both were saying there's something bigger than my philosophy. There's something deeper I got to tap into here. Numa's gonna go be a spiritualist and an ascetic pagan, and he's gonna try to sacrifice to the gods every day and hope that he's like in right alignment with the divine. I really don't want this job. Let me go live like this. Maybe by example, other people will live this way too. Please, we need you to come and do this. We need you to come and do this. He does a good job while he's alive. Lycurgus likewise says, Thales, please come here. You teach these people music because they're nuts and they're just impulsive present moment hedonists that are fighting with each other over anything. And they're just toddlers that are making their own lives worse, but they think, I got to fight against everybody. We got to turn these into a civilized people. So play them some music. Just teach them that there's a pattern and there's a thing that's bigger than their needs that they could be a part of. You do that, I'm gonna go study for 20 years. I'll be back. So that's the first comparison or similarity, a couple of them. And we've pointed out other things as we've been reading in those passages. But if we do a contrasting, all right, so then Lycurgus has this incredible idea that he's not going to write down any laws. Imagine you hire a philosopher. You know, there's an artist who was hired to do an art installation, and I think he wrote out the rules to have some big thing that had nothing on it, and he called it "Take the Money and Run," and that was his art installation. You got to be careful when you're hiring artists and poets who and philosophers who understand art and poetry. But Lycurgus very wisely, for a good reason, decided not to write down the laws. Instead, he put them into poetry, the fewest number of stanzas he could, that would remind people, that would resonate with people about this is the way I'm supposed to be. Because if it was written, like Numa wrote laws, didn't last. If it was written and there were corrupt people, or there was a seepage of corruption, or slightly just a little, well, what if I had this? And what if I do? Well, I could get away with that. Then people could look at the writing and say, well, you know, this comma, technically, I think it means this instead of this. And they can argue forever about that shit rather than just, you know what it means. You know what it means. Be like this is what the stanzas mean. Live like this is what the stanzas were saying. You're not allowed to do this, but the reason is your house has to be like this so that you remember this is what you're living for. So he wrote these poems for them. It lasted 500 years. If I told you there were two founders of two different nations, one wrote down a bunch of really wise laws and he sacrificed to the gods, and people were thriving underneath his reign till he was well into his 80s or 90s. And the other guy wrote poems, and those were the laws. Which one of those do you think would last longer? 500 years. Lycurgus has lasted twice as long as the United States has lasted so far. That's how long that tradition lasted. Numa's was gone shortly after he passed. I'm not trying to pick on Numa, but we're this point. You can watch the video on Lycurgus, you can watch the video on Numa, but the point of this conversation is to compare the two. I didn't make notes on this. There's other things that we could say. There's a lot more to compare them with, but let's read Plutarch's comparison, and that will remind us of things that we might want to also talk about. Remember, there's a link in the comments under this if you're watching on X, where you can come in here and add some stuff. You got some historical knowledge, you got another story that it puts you in mind of, you got anything you want to say, it'd be nice to have some conversations. 2 years ago, we were doing a lot of conversational stuff. So this is a year this is the kind of class that's more conversational. The year one stuff where we're reading and I've got charts and here's how you do logic and all that. This is less. It's a little bit more lectury, but it's also less than lectury. It's more like feel free to come in. Your contributions will be welcome. All right. So let's look at this. Plutarch comparison, the comparison of Numa with Lycurgus. Oh, we didn't do a simultaneous sip, and I don't have a beverage. We'll have to get it later. Having thus finished the lives of Lycurgus and Numa, we shall now, though the work be difficult, put together their points of difference as they lie before our view. Their points of likeness are obvious: their moderation, their religion, their capacity of government and discipline. They're both deriving their laws and constitutions from the gods. Yeah, that was another point. It is partially, yeah, that was, I think just said a lot about the first three. But there's another thing for us to think about, and let's see what he says about it. There's something of, hey, Homer, how did you write this great work of art? I was inspired by the Muses. We've read, I think there's a video of us reading Ion by Plato's dialogue there, where Socrates is talking to the artist. He's saying, "Here's how I think it works: the gods inspire the muses, who inspire you, or no, who inspire Homer, who inspire the poet, who writes this great work, who then also inspires you, who perform it better than anybody who just normally reads it. And that's why you're the Mick Jagger, and everybody pays fill out a concert to come listen to you read it, but you're really saying it, and it's inspirational, but you don't understand it any better than anybody else. It's really the chain of inspiration. The magnet magnetizes the metal, and so we've got this chain from the divine right down to humanity. That artistic inspiration is necessary for legal. We're learning from history now. So as much as you want to think this is crazy, divine inspiration is necessary. Remember when Benjamin Franklin said, "Guys, we're arguing about this whole Constitution thing a bit much. Everybody go home and pray." That was it. He said, "Everybody go home and pray and fast." I think it was for 24 hours. Then we'll come back and talk again. It turns out, you can believe it or not, it turns out that every historical record of every somewhat successful or very successful political tradition in its constitutionalization, in the forming of its constitution, said, "We're not going to be able to do this. We are not the sorts of creatures who have the ability to do this unless we're listening to heaven, unless we're turning our ears in that direction, because this is too big a task." So that was also true in both cases here. Oh, excuse me. Yet in their common glories, there are circumstances of diversity. Okay, so they all had that in common in different ways. There's differences and similarities in each of those categories too, as we talked about. But there's other differences more. For first, Numa accepted and Lycurgus resigned a kingdom. Now that's interesting. That's interesting. I hadn't noticed that. Maybe we did point it out, but Numa rules as king until his death. Lycurgus sets everything up, makes everyone swear they're going to follow the laws until he returns, goes and sacrifices in a different town. I think he went to Corinth at a temple and killed himself and made sure that his friends burnt his body and buried it at sea so that he could never be said to have returned, so that they would keep a. So Lycurgus is saying, "I'm not here to be king." Even the laws he set up, even if he had returned, they probably would have looked at him as a kind of king or something. But there still would have been a question open of whether or not they have to follow all of this. Swear you'll follow it till I get back. Little did they know he ain't coming back. And they followed it for 500 years. That's not something you do just because he made you swear something. It's because it worked. It made them happy. They thrived. Anyway, we've read about that. You can go and listen to it. So, the other thing we've noticed is that even within one of these stories, it's not as if the constitutionalizers, is this true? Yeah, there's textual evidence. It even within the story of just one state, it's not as if the lawgiver is saying this is the solution for everybody. All nations should be constituted in this way. They're starting by paying attention to what is the type of people I'm working with and what are their circumstances and what do they know and what don't they know and where are they aiming in the first place before he can start making laws that might work. Now, Lycurgus maybe was aiming at something a little more universal. Not that I'm endorsing that other people should adopt it, but I'm saying what he was aiming at. And Numa was looking at something cosmically spiritual, and the people just couldn't keep up with it, I think. It's too bad. They could while he was there. But in any event, Numa ruled. He acted as king until his death. And it was a long life, and it was a long, happy rule. And it was taking a warlike, crazy, disjointed people, the Sabines and the Romans and the Latins, like they're not getting along. And he turned them into one people. And he turned them into having a common identity. And he had them, it was working while he was there. But he accepted being king, although he put up his little protests. He accepted it and he kept it. But Lycurgus says, no, no, I'm going to do the minimal necessary thing. And I'm out of here. I don't want to keep touching it. I don't want it to be about me. I don't want to interact with it. I want to make something that doesn't change. And I want it to be untouchable by everybody, including me. Numa received without desiring it. Lycurgus had it and gave it up. The one from a private person and a stranger was raised by others to be their king. The other from the condition of a prince voluntarily descended to the state of privacy. It was glorious to acquire a throne by justice, yet more glorious to prefer justice before a throne. I'm with him. I think Lycurgus is better. The same virtue, which made the one appear worthy of regal power, exalted the other to the disregard of it. Lastly, as the musicians tune their harps, so the one lets down the high flown spirits of the people at Rome to a lower key, as the other screwed them up at Sparta to a higher note. I'm not sure about that. They had chaos amongst themselves. I'm not sure that's, hmm, I hate quarreling with the text, but is that your impression of what happened? I mean, that's the story people believe about Sparta. Oh, they're like, oh, I know what he's saying. Okay, yeah, he got them. No, I'm not paying attention to the word spirits. Yeah, that's obviously correct. The high spirits of the Romans, they need to be tempered and you need to be moderate. You need to be worried about the gods. You're out here doing great things for show and you think glory is right there for you. The gods are bigger. There's something bigger than Phil is Numa's message to the Romans at the beginning. Be afraid. Understand that you are so close to catastrophe. Let's pull this down. Whereas Lycurgus took a bunch of people who were, not one, and he said, "Think about the glory. Imagine the music of imagining being the high spiritual realm of like, we are a part of all the heavens singing to the glory of the divine, and like, let's stop being so petty and stupid." So yeah, obviously, I understand what he's saying now, and that's of course correct. To a higher note when they were sunken low by dissoluteness and riot. What a fun metaphor. What a fun image of imagine a harpist is tuning their lute. Sometimes you tune it up, sometimes you tune it down. You got to think about what your starting material is here. Okay. The harder task was that of Lycurgus, for it was not so much his business to persuade his citizens to put off their armor or ungird their swords as to cast away their gold and silver. I mean, please. Please, somebody raise your hand if you can imagine a person living on Earth today. Maybe there's 1 or 2, but come on. That task, he got them to give up they had ironed coins that were burnt in vinegar so that they couldn't even be turned into anything useful. He just said, "Stop thinking about money. It's over for that. That's over. That's too low for you. You don't think about money." But to think that you could accomplish that in a people, that's a harder task. That's both of these characters are larger than humanity. I mean, they're in tune with the gods. We know they've got a foot in legend, but both of these characters are nominate yourself so we can all laugh. You know what I mean? Like who thinks they could do such a thing? The harder task was that of Lycurgus. Uh-huh, gold and silver, and abandoned costly furniture and rich tables and anything that would distinguish them from anybody near them. Insecure people who know that their soul is saying you should be caring about something else. They love to think, I'm here financially. And if you're down here, I'm here, and you want to be here, don't you? And so, in other words, they love the idea that if you they love the idea of imagining themselves as benefactors. You could imagine a boss who you've worked for and done what you said you would do, saying, "I've given you so much money." No, you paid a paycheck. But there are people who say, like, "I know there's a part of me that knows I should be caring about this other thing, but but if I can get someone to say, 'I wish I was you,' I love that idea because then I don't have to worry that I'm not what I should be." Because it's just I love the mirror image of what you're providing for me in that. And, um, there's more we could say on that, but let's get back to this. So, by having, "Oh, I've got a slightly nicer table, I've got a slightly nicer whatever," both Numa and Lycurgus in their personal lives are saying, "I'm gonna live my life caring about the thing that actually matters because I'm gonna die, So I got to untie the knots in my soul, and this is going to take some time, and I have to actually just be dedicated to doing it. And by the way, it is the greatest thing. So it's satisfying of itself. If many riches come to me, great. I will probably want them to flow out just as quickly so that they go to the place where the wise where wisdom would say they should go to make things better around me, to make things better for other people. But but it's the love of money. It's not that money is evil. It's the idea that this is what tells me that I'm okay. This is what tells me that I don't need to worry about any of those other things. That is the nature of the people that Lycurgus is trying to deal with when he says, okay, we're going to be about a much bigger project. We're going to be about something much higher. And first, I got to get your eyes out of the dirt up to something higher. Now, I'm trying to underline that money is not evil, right? Gold shines, and so if you're looking at gold and you understand the principle of shining, it can also orient you possibly to think about the idea of shining, the idea of something high. The stars are shining too. You might end up looking up there at some point. But the love of money, the reason why people, I don't mean to be mentioning Christ's teaching because I'm not going to heretically try to say, I'm not looking at those verses and I'm not claiming to speak accurately about that right now. But it seems to me that there's something in the idea that there's a right relationship with money and a wrong one. There are lots of wrong ones, but one of the wrong ones is you're just not understanding that you're more noble than that. Right? There's something you should be living for. There's a higher self in you that's starving and acting like a slave, and everything's bullying you and pushing you into it, and you're all stuck in this. But there's something better. There's something transcendent. Doesn't mean we don't have money. We should have lots of money. Money should be flowing to us because we know where to put it to make things better around us. Maybe that could be great. No one's saying money is evil necessarily. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the small-minded present moment hedonists, the 2-year-old mentality of this is mine and oh, that's shiny. That should be mine too. It's like, well, what did you do to help make that? Well, no. It's like, okay, that pettiness is what Lycurgus has to deal with. And he's letting art and poetry and great profound historical and mythological tales get people to start looking up a bit. And he's saying, look, one of the poems is you have to use a chainsaw to cut the main beam in your house. What does that mean? It means it's rough and not really refined, and so you're not go he didn't have to write laws saying, "Don't have a really nice desk end table." So who would put a nice end table in something like this? I've got something to do. I'm gonna go live with the people. I'm gonna go be in the barracks. I'm gonna go be participating in this thing of all of us singing and dancing together where we're quiet. I mean, singing and dancing as a metaphor, where we're quiet and we're wise and we nod and we only use words when they're actually meaningful and careful and we're challenging each other to be excellent as each individual. That whole thing that he created for them, he didn't have to write a law about, well, you can't have this and you can't have this and you can't have that. He said, no, you all get the same thing. You all get a house, but it has to be this kind of a house. And that was enough for them to not be saying, well, I have this. My neighbor has the slightly better cappuccino maker, and in the prefab, not prefab, in the housing development project, mine has 3-car garage and yours only has 2. It's like we got to get rid of all of that stupidity because none of that is actually indicative of the excellence of the person. So sorry if that hurts anybody's pride, but you're all excellent. You all have souls. You all are endowed with spirit and you can commune with this higher thing. So with Numa, you can still have money. With Lycurgus, he's doing something so radically crazy. And I'm not endorsing that this is how people should live or this is how states should be, whatever. But this is a miracle. Just the fact that it could be done and last for 500 years is a miracle. The Spartans looked down upon money as something so dirty and beneath them. That's for the slaves. You think, oh, they had slaves that took care of the land and their crops and everything. It's like, yeah, but the slaves had all the money. The slaves had all the money. There's a statement for you. The slaves have all the money. Why don't you just think about that statement? Let's pause. The slaves have all the money. That's a problem. You can keep the money, but you could not be a slave. That would be better. So, all of that concern, I got the slightly better cappuccino maker than my neighbor. We got rid of a system where that could even be a thought that you would have. The Spartans are saying, I'm about honor. I'm about not being an asshole when I speak. I'm about not being easy to get into a fight. We think of the Spartans as warlike, but you look at the way they were so good at war that people would surrender and then they wouldn't slaughter their enemies. They would say, "Good, that's what we want. We want more of surrendering. Why would we punish you for surrendering? Oh, we're chasing you? We're not going to kill you. Why would we kill you? We want other people who hear about this to say, well, if I run away and give up, hands up, they won't actually even kill me. You're a bunch of cowards. We're brave. We don't mind dying, but we're not stupid either, right? Like they weren't bloodthirsty. They were like, how can we keep order with a bunch of insane craziness all around us? And it worked. Okay, so one thing is we have to actually believe ourselves to be a part of a project that rightly should be described as at least inspired. We're aiming towards something higher. So, cast away gold and silver. What a thing to do. Nor was it necessary to preach to them that laying aside their arms, they should observe the festivals. Right? Numa had to do a lot of preaching. Welcome, Roger. Please, if you're watching on X, feel free to join. I know that you might be at work now and you might not be able to talk, but it's nice to have you here. And if you type things, we'll read them. And if you unmute and interrupt at any point, it will be appreciated. And we will have our conversations as usual. Okay, the harder task was that of Lycurgus, and not so much the business to persuade the citizens to put off their armor and ungird their swords, to cast away their gold and silver, and abandon their costly furniture and their rich tables. Nor was it necessary to preach to them that laying aside their arms, they should observe the festivals and sacrifice to the gods, but rather that giving up feasting and drinking at all, they should employ their time in laborious and martial exercises. Okay, we remember we're focusing a bit too much on Lycurgus, but we're going to say something about Numa right now too. We remember that in Sparta, with what Lycurgus did, life was so hard in town that when they had to go to war, it was like a vacation. It's like, "Hey, this is easier. This is nothing to me." It wasn't like, "Oh, I gotta make it through." It was like they're just living every day preparing for the hardest things to keep them as minimized as possible in the world, and they became the arbiters of peace and everything. We know the stories, and we can talk more about them. I don't know if I mentioned when we were reading this, but Alexander the Great comes in and conquers Greece. He imposes a new order. Mm. Cool for him. By the way, we can read about Alexander the Great. We can read about what he did here in Plutarch, and we can read about Caesar reading about Alexander the Great in Plutarch. We can read about Caesar, and we also read about him reading about Alexander the Great and weeping and being pushed into his tent by his captains who say, "What are you doing crying in front of the soldiers? You're a captain out here maintaining the fringe elements of the empire against some barbarians. If they see you weeping, they're gonna think we're all about to die or something. What the hell are you doing? Why are you crying anyway, Caesar?" I was just reading about Alexander the Great. He was 22 and he took over the world. I'm 24 and I haven't done anything worth talking about yet. This is in your DNA. This is all in your DNA. We're reading quid rides mutato nomine. Change only the names. Find out what makes you. Find out that you're the legacy of these types of people and figure out what's true about you. So Numa had to get people to worship, get people to sacrifice. He made a lot of rules about how to do it properly. He put priests in charge of settling disputes, but he put them in charge of saying, "This is how you do your thing. Come to me and I'll tell you how to offer the grain sacrifice." Oh, and we're not going to do a lot of bloody sacrifices anymore. You're a bunch of bloody people. We're going to make you do things like he's trying to bring that, like Kirkus said, what a beautiful picture. I'm tuning up the note or I'm tuning down the note if I'm dealing with Rome or with Sparta. So the point that I didn't finish about Sparta was sacrifice and giving. Oh, okay. So one of the differences is that Numa is saying, look, I want you to enjoy the peace and the tranquility and the holy spiritual glory, grace, let's say grace of being in right relationship with the gods. So his law was when you sacrifice, eat a meal. Don't be hungry. Don't be miserable. Don't act like this is a burden. Understand that this is a part of your life and that you get to serve the gods and do it healthily and with enjoyment. Sparta, he says, eat the same brown black bean gruel every day that nobody else in Sparta thinks is even edible, and have that for every meal, but make sure you're eating with each other. Make sure you're talking with each other. Make sure you have your tiny groups where there's 100% consensus that you've let all 15 members in because you like each other's company, and joke with each other and develop your skills and challenge each other and do that. Live there and do that. But your stomach shouldn't be feeling good. You should be pleased that you don't need your stomach to feel good, because we got to be ready for some tough stuff. Okay. So we're seeing comparing and contrasting here. Um, and that picture of tuning up and tuning down. So before we continue, let's maybe finish the sentence. I should employ the labor sectors. While the one affected all by persuasions and by people's love for him, the other with dagger and hazard of his person, scarcely in the end succeeded. Okay, so let's put a button on this. I'm saying it's hard to think of Numa as greater than Lycurgus. We talked about it from what we remembered of what we read in the last two videos in this course. Um, Plutarch has the same conclusion, and he has it for a number of reasons. And this last one is Lycurgus didn't need to scare people that if they didn't obey him, there'd be consequences. Numa is doing the normal thing. I mean, it's hard to say, like, oh, how bad is Numa? He had to do that. That's every other political tradition in the world. That's the nature of it. Okay. What Lycurgus is doing is a miracle. Okay. It's a miracle. And all you commies out there, it's an example of communism, but you can only have communism if everybody's in the military. It's fine. You can have it there, but it's a miracle. It's understood as a miracle by the people doing it and by the historians looking at it. And so if you want to do it, go read that passage again and see what you have to give up to actually be able to do it, and see if you're ready to be that disciplined. You have to you're not just getting rid of the wealthy people. You're not saying they're evil and greedy. You're getting rid of your fucking envy and your crime and your poor poverty attitude. That's just as much the evil. They're both working with each other. So you get rid of both of them. It's no virtue to be a miserable cunt. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I've been working very hard over the last few years to not swear as much. It's no virtue to be an envious, miserable cunt and say, I don't have money, therefore I'm spiritually better than other people. It's like, you don't even get along with your effing roommates. Okay. You are not going to organize a state. You don't understand how you go on X and you say, well, if we just took away all the billionaires' money, then I know how to give it to people properly. You're going to be eating each other very rapidly, and everybody knows it. So shut the fuck up. Okay. Like, this is a miracle. It is a miracle that it worked, and it's a miracle. I'm not exaggerating or trying to use hyperbole. There is no other word for it than miracle that it lasted 500 years, twice as long as we've lasted so far. This is a miracle of statecraft. It's a miracle of constitutionality. It's a miracle of law writing. Okay? Go back and watch that video again. But it's such a miracle that Lycurgus doesn't. It seems like Lycurgus has the level of wisdom to say, I don't want to succeed unless I can persuade you into wanting to do it already, and then I don't need to have a police force that makes you do it. It's like, it's so, imagine doing something so difficult that he's like, I'm gonna go spend 20 years studying to figure out how to do it, and then deciding that the way you're gonna do it is so excellently that you're not gonna allow any. I mean, my goodness, Moses, eat your heart out. I'm not making a wrong comparison there, but like, seriously, you're trying to make laws for a people and make them work together. The billion problems that come up, well, I won't write the laws. Then we won't have to legislatively argue. You know what it means. Challenge each other. You meditate on what it means. Sing about what it means. Tell each other this is who we are all the time. Swim in the waters of that. Okay, Lycurgus, where are you coming from? Like, honestly, where the hell did you come from? Like, he's inspired and he's going to the gods for help. And this is a rare type of thing. And we can look at the founding of the United States, and there's a lot of the same types of things going on. So it was so unbelievable that he didn't have to even have a police force. He just said, look, I'm just going to tell you how it works. Try it out. First, you're going to have the music you're going to be aiming at. Try it out. It's simple. This is how I think you should live. 500 years they fought and died and lived and died for the Spartan way of life. 500 years. Numa, you can definitely eat your heart out on this one. All right. We have some notes. Another figure who shortly followed Alexander, but was probably unknown to Plutarch, was for him a barbarian king, but is also a great contemporary example. I think we're going to the Indus Valley. Let's go see. Emperor Ashoka of the I hate that I mispronounce things, so I hope I didn't. Of the Mauryan Empire is another great example of a foundational ruler. There's so many great novels by Rushdie that I can't wait to read, in that other literature class. There's a lot going on in the Indus Valley, and Roger is, giving us a good example. I wish I could add this to the screen so you can see what I'm reading, but I'm just gonna read what he wrote for us here. He implemented laws in the form of rock edicts. He promoted Buddhism. He promoted religious ecumenicism and tolerance. When he died after ruling for 40 years, his realm collapsed. Rough. Look at this. This is a great example. Numa, sorry, buddy, you're unbelievable. But look how hard it is to do the thing that's being done. Like we've got unbelievably dedicated, wise people. They're not saying, "Oh, this will be easy." They're saying, "I'm going to do my best." And Numa held it together till he died, and it didn't work. What Lycurgus did is a miracle. What happened through the work of Lycurgus, we could even say, is miraculous. Okay, ruled over most of what is current day India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. We're going to be spending a lot of time paying attention to that area of the world. Hopefully soon, if we can keep this going. We're trying to keep all these classes going. Some of you have seen about the whole curriculum. There's a lot to do, and it would be nice. But we have many reasons to be visiting India. Let's get back to Sparta and Rome. Numa's muse was a gentle and loving inspiration, fitting him well to turn and soothe his people into peace and justice out of their violent and fiery tempers. Whereas, if we must admit the treatment of the Helots to be a part of Lycurgus's legislation, a most cruel and iniquitous proceeding, we must own that Numa was by a great deal more humane and Greek-like legislator. Very interesting. That's a cool observation. Since I'm raising up Lycurgus all the time, let's notice that this is a good point. Granting even to actual slaves a license to sit at meat with their masters at the feast of Saturn. They also they also might have some taste and relish of the sweets of liberty. Okay. So we've said that Numa's more of a spiritualist and aesthetic. People think the pagans are like dancing naked in the woods. It's like the most aesthetic medieval monk whipping himself looks a lot more like these serious religious pagans than you imagine. They look more like each other than either of them look like us. And Numa is a very good point, is a great deal more humane. So he's giving the name of Greek virtue to that, right? So he's founding Rome, and he's saying, well, if you think about what it means to be Greek, to be open-minded and tolerant and liberal and philosophical and to care about ideas and to want to have a forum where you can tell me I'm wrong and it doesn't go into fist fights, but we're going to actually just talk things out forever and enjoy the beauty of the conversation of sophisticating our views and hashing things out and listening to anyone who's willing to come and talk. It's like, that's pretty nice. Numa seems to be a lot more like that than this Spartan guy. You know, what you might say is just like a people need a government, but it needs to be restrained because of the worst elements. It's almost really like Greece needed a police force. And so you're looking at in Sparta, the army. Now, they all had armies and fought with each other, but when Sparta showed up, they all stopped and they lost, basic. I mean, cartoon version of history, but not much of an exaggeration, right? So you can almost imagine that what Lycurgus is doing is saying, here's how we'll have a very disciplined army to allow order to exist and minimize the amount of war in the peninsula. But they're warlike. And so Lycurgus is making a group of people who are pretty freaking rough. Pretty tough. It's not you gotta be tough if you're gonna get to adulthood in Sparta. We saw that. It's pretty rough. All right. If you were looking at how do we just make people a more maternal attitude of concern and empathy is definitely in Numa. Okay. Numa's saying, like, hey, come on, guys. Yes, there's slaves. Yes, there's masters, but we're one people. And you know what? Everybody should have an idea of why life is sweet and good. And so let's stop with all like, and he's like, let's make things nice. Have a meal when you sacrifice. Don't be hungry and miserable. I'm trying to help you fear the gods, but I'm trying to get you oriented towards that in a way where it's not like a burden. And Sparta, Lycurgus is like, not like a burden. Like, I've hacked the system. Welcome burdens. Be a people who welcome burdens, and you can be a Spartan. So, yeah, there's definitely a difference. And if you think to yourself, well, it's nicer to be Numa, there's a good point. He's superior in niceness, not in providing a happy constitutional system that lasts beyond his death for 500 years, not providing something that minimizes war. Much more war with Rome all the time. It's all you can think about. Much more warlike, bloodthirsty people in Rome than in Sparta. The Spartans are trying to minimize the need for bloodshed. They're trying to minimize the need for war. Be so scary that everybody stops their bullshit because you might show up. Okay. But to do that, he has to make a people who are, it's not very comfortable. All right. Numa's like, come on, guys, let's calm it down a bit. What about the niceness of having goodness in life? It's kind of sweet and nice. So it's like a mommy and a daddy almost. For this custom too is ascribed to Numa, whose wish was, why can't we all just get along? Whose wish was they conceived to give a place in the enjoyment of the yearly fruits of the soil to those who had helped to produce them. Others will have it to be in remembrance of the age of Saturn, when there was no distinction between master and slave, but all lived as brothers and as equals in a condition of equality. If you like equality, go hang out with Numa and find out that you're going to have a lot of war probably after he's gone. But hey, under his reign, it was pretty nice. The second king of Rome, it, he kept it at bay, but those elements were all there. Those the people that he didn't excise that from their character. So we just have to deal with it. He's more of a spiritualist. They're both relying on inspiration from the divine. There's all these differences and similarities. They had different raw material to work with. They were very wise, very learned, very careful, very cautious, understood about not having a final solution in everything, but to constitute a people and not just dictate every detail of their lives. But in Sparta, the individuals were dictators over themselves. And in Rome, there were still people who aspired to be dictators over the people, and that collapsed quite rapidly after Numa was gone. So, in general, that's the principle. The founding fathers said it often: "You will rule yourself, or you will be ruled by others." If you're afraid of totalitarianism and the collapse of liberty in America and the thing that was constituted not working well into the future and losing your freedom, you deserve it. You deserve it. The only way that can happen to you, I promise you this is true. The only way that can happen to you, stop looking up and say, they're doing it to me. You're not ruling yourself. Rule yourself, and no one else has to rule you. Don't rule yourself. That will fill in the mists of demonic energy. It's going to fill in the vacuum. It's going to. No one has to plan it out. There's no there might be mustache twisters out there, but there's no need for it. You don't need a conspiracy. It will fill the vacuum. But that's really good news because you could decide today to discipline yourself, to govern yourself, to say, I'm going to worry about my soul and stop trying to manipulate other things. I'm going to worry about whether or not when I speak, it makes things worse or better. I'm going to worry about not, can I get likes and subscribes and say something on X that makes other people angry? Aren't I clever? Yeah, you're clever. You're laughing yourself all the way into the slave house. Congratulations for you. And then when you're there, you get to know that you helped bring it about. You don't have to do that. And the fact that it's your fault is great news because you could turn it all around. Right now, today, you could say, you know what? Screw my foolishness and screw all of this. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm going to walk this way. I'm going to go that way. I'm going to care about the thing that actually matters. You can do that and see what happens. Because if everybody else decides it's going to be a totalitarian nightmare, they'll kill you. Sure, great. I want to be the first one lined up against the wall. I don't want to live with people like you as neighbors. questioning my party loyalty. You have your hell that you create. Dispatch me first. That's fine. I'm going to work on my soul. I'm going to make sure that I've got the only thing that really matters, I've got that right. I'm going to do that. You do whatever stupidity you want. I wish I could turn you around, but I'm not your king. Rule yourself. If you chose to do that, you have no idea how much of a golden age is ahead of you. You have no idea. You look online, it's oh, the catastrophe, everything is so horrible. Yup. It's coming like Christmas. It's coming like Christmas to you. I don't know how schizoid you have to be able to recognize the pattern, but it's coming like Christmas. You're not wrong. But you have no idea how good things could be. You have no idea how much that ship can be turned around very rapidly if that's what you decided to do. In general, it seems that both aimed at the same design and intent. We haven't had our simultaneous sip, and I just got all preachy in a way that I'm not embarrassed about at all. We're going to pause. I'm going to go get something to drink, and we're going to have our simultaneous sip, and then we're going to or we're going to continue our reading of the comparison of these two. My friends, you know what you got to do. It's a simple and wonderful thing to do. You got to get your cup. If you're at the office, go get your coffee. Hurry up. Your cup, your mug, your glass, your tankard, your chalice, your thermos, or your stein, your canteen, your jug, your flask, your vessel of any kind. And you fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. I'm drinking water today. And you join me now for the dopamine hit of the day, the unparalleled pleasure, the thing that makes everything, literally everything better. It's you and I together simultaneously sipping. It's called the simultaneous sip, and it happens right now. Go. Ooh, that's some good stuff. Thank you, Scott. In general, it seems that both aimed at the same design and intent, which was to bring their people to moderation and frugality. But of other virtues, the one set his affection most on fortitude and the other on justice, unless we will attribute their different ways to the different habits and temperaments which they had to work upon by their enactments. For Numa did not, out of cowardice or fear, affect peace, but because he would not be guilty of injustice. Nor did Lycurgus promote a spirit of war in his people, that they might do injustice to others, but that they might protect themselves by it. Certainly, the principle of evil opposed to evil. We got it. It's everywhere in this. In bringing the habits they formed in their people, no, remember, they're forming a people and they're making habits. This isn't lawmaking, it's constitutionality, and it's not just constitutionality to write something. We have a written constitution. That's another miracle, miraculous innovation as things have moved. But it's not just written laws for the governors that you can't do this, and if you do this, we told you to do, you can't do it in a way that violates this free speech right, and blah blah blah. It's not just that. It's to constitute the people in the beginning, to give them the story of who they are and the habits. Very much we saw this with both of them. Here's a similarity between Numa and Lycurgus. If you're engaged in a cultural project, systems are better than goals. If you're engaged in a cultural project, systems are better than goals. Let's look at this on the individual level. Let's say you wanted to change your life in some way and everything around you seems built to this is too big a task. You may as well just order Netflix and Domino's and forget about it and whatever. because you don't see how to do it. Well, what if you designed a system around you that just made it easy to do the things you needed to do? What if you said, okay, I need to lose some weight. I'm going to go buy an inexpensive scale at Walmart and put it in the middle of my living room so I can weigh myself 8 times a day. So I'm just keeping track of the number. So it's something I'm thinking about, and you can't manage something you're not measuring, as Scott said. What if I am striving for dopamine hits and I go to Taco Bell and I'm eating the wrong stuff? Well, what if I set up a corner of my room with like a massage chair? I could just sit there for 5 minutes anytime I want, takes no setup at all, and I just sort of get a better feeling and I'm ready to keep working. Like, what if I designed it so it was easy for me to do the sorts of things that allow me to stay focused on stuff, right? You can design things so that your habits are easy in the right direction, and then maybe a lot of other things change after that. What is Lycurgus going to do? What is Numa going to do to create a people that behave and act and live and just kind of are constituted as individuals differently and working in harmony with one another in a very different way? They're going to create habits for them. Okay. So we're on the level of forming a people, not just writing a constitution, right? What's like, that's what Lycurgus is doing with his enactments. That's what Numa is doing. They're enacting systems. And both of them are using minimal necessary force, Lycurgus to an unbelievable degree, Numa just not rushing in to make 1,000 laws about everything, but making a lot of laws about certain things so that you can understand that's what you're supposed to care about. But Lycurgus very gently saying, like, I could write this, and then people would know that that's the direction of the spirit of the law, and it would have to resonate in them because they have to read it in poetry that's not written down, and it can't be written down. And they got to talk about it with each other and say, like, I'm reminding you that you're not seeming to act according to that stanza right now. Like, oh yeah, that's right. We are this thing and we do this. So he changes the way you eat your meals. He changes the way you have your house. He changes a couple of things that just affect everything in that realm and create habits and systems over goals. It's the only way even though it's still a miracle what they both accomplished, especially Lycurgus, it's still a partial explanation of, well, you're gonna definitely fail if you do it any other way than that. Can you look low enough to say, like, what are the tiny details I should be doing that can create habits where I just thoughtlessly am doing the thing I should be doing that doesn't get in my way of other things? We could talk about that more some other time. But this was definitely the focus with both of them. They formed in their people just and happy mean, mitigating them where they exceeded, strengthening them where they were deficient. Both were compelled to make great innovations. Yep, all of that's true of both of them. In frame of government which Numa formed was the frame of government which Numa formed was democratic, popular to the last extreme. Goldsmiths and flute players and shoemakers constituting this promiscuous, many-colored commonality. Very easy for that to go wrong. Went really well when Numa was alive. They kinda had a father who could just sorta like maybe a grandfather, who could just be peacefully sacrificing all the time and sort of by example and the greatness of his character, it worked while he was alive. Lycurgus was rigid and aristocratical, banishing all the base and mechanic arts to the company of servants and strangers, and allowing the true citizens no implements but the spear and shield and trade of war only, and the service of Mars, and no other knowledge or study. Mm, yeah, yeah. A lot of study within that goes further than you would imagine, but yes. But that of obedience to their commanding officers and victory over their enemies. Every sort of money making, so it's a very limited kind of a life there, right? You've got color and beauty, and this guy's into literature, and this person over here is inventing a new kind of thing for your garden. And it's like loud and crowded, but it was all harmonious and beautiful and musical under Numa. And with Lycurgus, it lasted a lot longer, but it was like, maybe we simplified things a bit. Maybe there's more to life than this. And maybe you need this. And maybe if you take all of Greece, you say, what a blessing to all of Greece that Sparta could be just this. Maybe. Who knows? But the Spartans lived for 500 years defending to the death this way of life. So maybe we're a bunch of Democrats that are very soft and thinking like we need a lot of other stuff we don't really need. Who knows? That's open for good conversation. Okay. Lycurgus ridges are such an implements of being officers. Every sort of money making was forbidden for them as freemen, and to make them thoroughly so keep them and to make them thoroughly so and keep them so through their whole lives, every conceivable concern with money was handed over, with the cooking and the waiting at table to slaves and helots. All the slaves have all the money. But Numa made none of these distinctions. He only suppressed military rapacity, allowing free scope to every other. So there's a lot more freedom under Numa. It's Sparta is totalitarian. I don't know if I mentioned that in this video. We mentioned that a lot. This is a totalitarian state. It's just a weird one that worked. Don't think you can go make one out of your dumb ideas. Uh, but Numa made none of these distinctions. He only suppressed military rapacity, allowing free scope to every other means of obtaining wealth, nor did he endeavor to do away with inequality in this respect, but permitted riches to be amassed to any extent and paid no attention to the gradual and continual augmentation and influx of poverty, which it was his business at the outset, whilst there was no great disparity in the estates of men, and whilst people still lived much in one manner, to obviate, as Lycurgus did, and take measures of precaution against the mischiefs of avarice, mischiefs not of small importance, but the real seed and first beginning of all the great and extensive evils of after times. All right. We've seen in both of them, there's a great evil in poverty and in the crimes that are committed by poor people. And there's a great evil in not in being rich, but in money supplying for your idea of who you are the wrong sort of thing it shouldn't, maybe. I don't know exactly. I'm not going to be preachy on that. I'm not the expert on these topics. But in both we saw like okay, and of course with Sparta, not only do we see, okay, that there's a problem on both sides of this and that you can get rid of both of them because they're actually two expressions of the same problem. But with Sparta, we have radical equality so long as you're willing to have nothing. You have no coins, you have a house where you can live, and you have enough land to supply for yourself and to contribute to the community a little bit, but you're not even allowed to work it. The slaves have to work it. You've provided it for them, they've provided for you. Who's whose slave at what point? And that's what you got. You got nothing more and no better version than anybody else. Now go live like a soldier. So you can have communism if you're in the army. That's basically the exception that proves the rule is where can you have communism if you're in the army? Okay, yeah, it works there. But where's the democracy? Where's the freedom? Where's the liberty? Where's the idea that we're going to be building something where there's a reason to be alive besides just knowing that we can stave off war and keep this thing going? We need the Spartans, heaven help us, but wouldn't you rather live in Athens? And this is the point that's being made here. So Numa, maybe we can say, oh, it didn't last as long, but maybe we can also say he was trying to accomplish a great deal more. And maybe you just need more wise people like Numa, and maybe they came to him too late in the sense that, like, did he have time to raise somebody up who could also be the next Numa? I don't know. It's hard to think about making something like that work, especially with the raw material of the fledgling Romans. But at least Numa was aimed at, could we have some liberty here? Could there be a reason to be alive besides just being miserable to yourself and then being a misery to anyone who shows up on the battlefield against you? Like, good job on that, but how do we have one people? So he put limits. You can't be making too much money by attacking people, right? We're going to limit how you make money that way. Going to war. We're trying to make you less bloodthirsty. But make all the riches you want, make beautiful things, have wonderful chandeliers that are magnificent, right? Not just, be magnanimous and generous and haughty and proud, right? This is Roman virtues, right? Be like show off. Magnanimity is a virtue that we in our Christian era, this is from the pagans. Magnanimity. What is magnanimity? It's not generosity, right? You have to have wealth to be virtuous if you need these two virtues. These two virtues, you can't be this virtue without wealth. There are virtues that are only available to you if you have wealth. The Greeks and Romans are saying. One of them is generosity. That's fine. That's okay. I'm not worried. I'm going to give you something. Aren't I big? And isn't it great to be like that? And you should aspire that way. But the other one is magnanimity. And we don't even know what this means as a difference. Magnanimity is my daughter's getting married. So I'm going to spend $125,000 on a chandelier to use just that one day for that one occasion because we should do big, great things and remind ourselves that it's for something like that's magnanimity. It's not generous. Nobody needed that chandelier. You know what I mean? It's just those are virtues that we can understand from the Greeks and Romans that maybe we don't pay as much attention to, or maybe they exist in a different form for us, but we could pay attention to them. All right. In any case, Numa's like, yeah, let's have a lot of that type of stuff, right? If you're all poor, none of you are generous in that sense. If you're all poor, none of you can be magnanimous. Wouldn't it be nice to have like, who's going to build the giant cathedral? Who's going like that's big? It's Magnus. It's big. It's magnanimous, right? Who's going to do that if we don't have any money? So there's some virtue that is not possible in Sparta. Okay, and maybe if you've got only one virtue you care about, you can be Spartan. But and maybe that can last longer more easily because it's just one thing. It's not quarreling with the other things. These virtues, they're like girlfriends and envious of each other. Maybe Numa's doing or Lycurgus is doing an easier task. It's still miraculous, it's still unbelievable, but what we're here to discuss is, which of these is the greater of these two. Lycurgus is maybe setting himself an easier task. Let's have one virtue that's really out in front. Yeah, the other virtues are there, but this is the thing we're caring about. Let's have one God we're serving. Let's do this one thing right. We can make a people out of that. Yeah, you can have an army. You can have a military and they've got their idea of virtue and you can set up the habits and the structure that they can thrive and do that well. But really, is Sparta a beautiful thing to look at if it was the only city state in Greece and there just was nothing else? Like everybody would say, why the hell are you living like that? It's serving the rest of Greece is what it's doing. It's serving the rest of Greece. It's being the police force. It's helping geopolitical instability. Okay. It's doing a great miraculous thing that you would be impossible to do. But it's easy to do that when you get rid of all the billion ways that you can slightly quarrel with lawyers about written laws and that you can say, I have a slightly better cappuccino maker. Well, it's nice to have a better cappuccino maker. It's nice that people want to make better cappuccino makers. Those things are nice, you know? So, like, maybe Numa didn't have a tradition that lasted as long because we're not as evolved to live in that heaven yet. Okay. But at least he's not just reducing the Romans to one thing and one thing only. So I've been praising Lycurgus at the expense of Numa a lot in this, but we're trying to have a conversation. We're trying to take on both sides. We're trying to figure it out by bouncing it back and forth. And it seems like as much as we're seeing the effects of corrupt systems that pretend to be what they were supposed to be about, but have all sorts of financial and power is really the fun one. Money means nothing to the real demons in our systems. Um, it's all just crumbling because none of it's real anymore, and we're just feeding off the corpse of our dead ancestor. Uh, and so we think to ourselves, well, maybe we need to stop with all the avarice and the whatever. Remember, whatever we set up, it needs to be beautiful. It needs to be worth waking up for. It's nice to have money to stave off catastrophes. It's like I hope that while we're praising the Spartans who are Spartan and while we're looking and paying attention to them, that we're not saying like, okay, well, I don't live like a Spartan. Like I've got a fat belly here. I'm losing a little weight. I've got a new diet, but you know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to say that's the way everybody should be. We're just trying to compare historically what project was being done and what are the various the contradictory competing cooperative virtues that we can see in both of these stories. And this observation, the second one that he makes, it's really only the second time that Plutarch is saying, like, do you notice that Numa's doing something a little bit better or trying to, right? Is the fact that, like, okay, great, you got rid of money. Go to the commissary and get your spear because everybody's got the same spear. you're in Warcraft, and it worked really well, but it's rare to make something that works like that, and you have to be completely committed as a people to one principle and one principle only, and so it's like, okay, good, but if the whole world was just Sparta in that one location, you would think of these as a very stupid animal, right? Maybe. Numa made none of these distinctions. He only suppressed military rapacity. Okay, we read this. So yeah, so he's putting a little bit of checks on things, but like, come on, guys, let's make cool stuff, and that's kind of beautiful. It's not like, ooh, I'm a selfish person. I have a nicer car than you. It's like, get that out of your head. It's a nicer car. Isn't that cool? They're making newer, nicer cars. Like, what the heck's wrong with that? Okay, stop with the bloodshed where you go and rape and pillage other villages and come back with a bunch of gold. We're going to put an end to that, says Numa. But have at it. Let's do some cool shit. Compete, cooperate, make a lot of money. It's great. Money, 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 money in the proper place of a people who are worried about being oriented properly with the divine. That sounds swell, says Numa. Okay, puts a little checks, few things, obvi. Okay, which is a business at the outset. Whilst there was no great disparity in the states of men, and whilst people still lived in much in one manner, to obviate as Lycurgus did and take measures of precaution against the mischiefs of avarice, mischiefs not of small importance, but the real seed and first beginning of all the great and extensive evils of after times. The redivision of estates, Lycurgus is not, it seems to me, to be blamed for making, nor Numa for omitting. Okay, so I love this. So far, Plutarch has been giving us a story, a history story of Lycurgus, a history. It's a story of Numa. And he's saying, let's see what we can get out of understanding where we come from and what some of the greatest accomplishments ever were. Now that he's comparing them, he's saying, okay, let's take all the differences and sort of put them on a table and say, well, this one seems to make Lycurgus a little better. This one seems to make the project Numa was trying to do even greater. This one makes it's like we're weighing on a scale. This is to Lycurgus's credit. This is to Lycurgus's credit. This is to Lycurgus's credit. Don't fail to notice that Numa gets points for this and this other thing over here. And Lycurgus did this, right? And then he's saying, okay, what about this one? This is a difference. This is something they both did differently. So who gets the credit? Did this guy make the right choice or did that guy make the right choice? He's saying, throw that one out. Throw that one out. It doesn't count on either side because it was the right thing for Lycurgus to do, and it would have been the wrong thing for Numa to do. They're doing a project with different people. So Lycurgus is like, let's redivide the states. So again, if you're simple minded, you say, well, I'm looking for the right laws. There aren't the right laws. They're the thing that a wise person inspired by the gods can gently do to help constitute a people with minimal necessary force, but it's dependent on that specific people, that specific person, like what the gods need to exist in this time and place. It's not like there are laws that are the right thing to do. Figure them out and just salute that flag, and now you're happy forever. Things are changing. The environment changes. Like what we need are a people who are vibrating with a higher idea of a higher pattern to be a part of. And this is very, very sophisticated. And as Plutarch is talking about the lives of these founders, he's understanding we're talking about something really sophisticated. This isn't, there's not a job description to go do this. You can't take a course in how to become this person. It's not needed that often. But we're looking at the historical reality that these two people did these things. So, what's that like? What does that tell us about where laws come from? Is there divine inspiration? What does it mean to have the types of habits that make me into the type of person who can work harmoniously with a lot of other people towards a greater vision of something more important and keep that continuing? The redivision of estates, like so on that topic, here's a difference between the two. Does it go to Lycurgus or does it go to Numa? This goes to nobody, he says. Lycurgus did the right thing, and Numa did the right thing by doing the opposite thing. What did Lycurgus do? He took all the property, cut it into even bits, and said everybody gets the same amount. And when you're born, if you pass the test of being born healthy enough, you get your 40 acres and a mule. You get your house built the same kind of way. You're enough land to feed yourself and your family and to contribute to the community a little bit and to support the slaves who are doing all of that work. And you get your slave actually. So you get the three things that you need there. but that's all you're ever going to have. So stop thinking about having more things because you're going to be worrying about, are you a Spartan? Are you living life properly? Are you clever in the words you say? Are you careful and not using too many words? Are you helping to teach the younger people how to exercise? All that stuff we read about. Whereas Numa did no such thing. Hey, we're going to redistribute all of the property. No, no, that would have been a very bad thing for him to do, right? So the weird project Lycurgus is doing in Sparta, it was the right thing for him to do. It would have been insane for Numa to do it. It wouldn't have served any purpose. It would have messed a lot of things up and made all these people. It would have destroyed everything. So he's saying, yeah, there's a difference there, but don't get it confused. There's neither of these is right. Right? The point of the story isn't give up your property or have the same property as other people. Like, that's not the point of the story. The point is, neither of these is the right rule. This was right for Lycurgus to do. Doing it would have been wrong for Numa to do. So they both get points. They both get points for making the right decision there. Okay. Equality was the basic foundation of the Commonwealth, but at Rome, where the lands had been lately divided, they were already divided. We're not going to upheaval this again. There was nothing to urge any redivision or any disturbance of the first arrangement, which was probably still in existence. Yeah, we had read about that as we were reading Numa. I thought to myself, like, man, I remember a division of land that had already been done. It would have been very foolish for Numa to be like, okay, I know we've just settled all of that, but let's redo it so it goes to my glory because I'm the one who figured it all out. Like, stop. Don't do superfluous things. Everybody's settled. They took over the land. They've just become a people. They're kind of two different people that have been fighting, but they've just sort of established a thing and they want to be constituted into a people. They've figured out who owns what. They figured out how that starts and they can trade with each other and they can expand their estates and they can do all of that stuff. And Numa's like, cool with that, right? It would have been weird for him to do the Spartan thing and it would have been dumb, says Plutarch. With respect to wives and children in that community, which both with a sound policy appointed to prevent all jealousy, their methods, however, were different. Yep, maybe they were different and also maybe nobody should do what Sparta did. You know what I mean? It's like we said this over and over again while reading Lycurgus. We're like, look at what is being accomplished here. Also, what moron would try to do this again? Like this worked for very specific reasons, but anybody imagining like, let's just do it that way is insane. Lycurgus wasn't acting like, oh, we'll just do it this way. It's easy. It's like this was a very unique time in history as well. Um, so let's see what's going on. For when a Roman thought himself to have a sufficient number of children, in case his neighbor, I know this is going Apollonian, in case his neighbor who had none should come and request his wife of him, he had a lawful power to give her up to him who desired her, either for a certain time or for good. The Lacedaemonian husband, on the other hand, might allow the use of his wife to any other that desired to have children by her, and yet still keep her in his house, the original marriage obligation still subsisting as at first. Okay. So the Romans also have this project here, which is like with the Romans, they're owning their women like property. With Sparta, the women are kind of in charge in a way that make the other Greeks go, "What the hell is going on here?" Like that was pretty weird and unique. But in Rome, it's like, I've got a mule and I'm not using it. You need to use it to plow the field. Sure, rent it from me. Oh, I've got as much children as I want, and my wife is still of childbearing age. Would you like to make a child with my wife? Yeah, you can do that. In fact, you can have her. You could buy her from me. Like it's a totally different thing than what we were describing in Sparta. In Sparta, this marriage mattered, and also you were barely allowed to see each other, so that you really wanted to see each other again, and you were never like never had enough time with each other. You were the world of women and men was very separate, and then when they came together, it was very ceremonial and orchestrated. But this marriage mattered. Like this thing is a thing. But the wife could come to the husband and go, "Yeah, we're trying to build a thing for Sparta. I think Frank over there would make a really good child." And they could all work it out and talk it out and let it happen and whatever. So they both sort of have very different versions of this type of thing going on. And for the Spartans, the role of women was not slave. The role of everybody was slave, and so there was no difference. But women were not the slaves of men in Sparta. They might have been everywhere else in Greece to some degree. I'm not giving a pro-feminist perspective. Maybe that's what they want. I'm not saying. a far right or a far left thing. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying the fact of the description is in Sparta, that was an exception. In Sparta, women could say things that they wouldn't be allowed to get away with saying and insult people that they wouldn't be allowed to insult in a lot of other places without bad consequences. In fact, it was part of what this civilization required to make the men do the things they needed to do was these ladies are going to make fun of you, buddy. You can't be a coward. And so obviously the perspective of the feminine in that dynamic, Venus and Mars and all that relation, that exists everywhere in human nature. But in Sparta, the role of women was not, hey, I own this woman, do what you want with her, I rent her from me. That's sort of more what it was like in Rome. The Lacedaemonian husband, on the other hand, might allow nay, many husbands, as we have said, would invite men whom they thought likely to produce them fine and good looking children into their houses. What is the difference then between the two customs? Shall we say that the Lacedaemonian system is one of an extreme and entire unconcern about their wives, and would cause most people endless disquiet and annoyance with pangs and jealousies? The Roman course wears an air of a more delicate acquiescence, draws the veil of a new yeah, it's like the dirtier it is, the more you come around. Course wears an air of a more delicate acquiescence, draws the veil of a new contract over the change, and concedes the general insupportableness to of mere community? Is that what we're supposed to think about this? Numa's directions, too, for the care of young women are better adapted to the female sex and to propriety. Lycurguses are altogether unreserved and unfeminine, and have given a great handle to the poets, the rap battle artists who can make fun of this stuff he pulled it off, who call them Ibicus, for example, Phonomerides, bare-thighed, and give them the character, as does Euripides, of being wild after husbands. Okay, what is this primal, weird, animalistic? This is from the outside looking at the way Sparta is, but it's like, what's going on over here? This is weird, and it doesn't seem very feminine to us. Is that the judgment we're going to make? The Spartans just didn't really value the feminine. They make babies, whatever. Let's see. It seems to me from what we read that the Spartans viewed war as a manly duty, and it was the main thing they were going to care about. And we can see it in the text. Go back and look at it. It seems to me that they saw childbirth as woman war and just as noble. That's what it seems like to me. And of course, all the other Greeks are making fun of the Spartans for listening to their wives. Like the amount of respect that the women had in Sparta was not characteristically, at least to the other Greek eyes, anything like what was going on in the rest of Greece or the pagan world. Now, in the Christian world, women say I do to get married. In the Christian world, there's a total revolution of this thing where both of them, see, in Sparta, everybody's property in a sense. So everybody's a slave. So there's not really a difference between the feminine and the masculine slaves that's possible. It's not like the Spartan men are slaves and the women are even lower slaves. It's kind of like they're equal, but they're equal because none of us are like masters in Rome. None of us have money. None of us are like that, right? So there's an equality between them. Like in communism, you can get equality if you just reduce everything to the zero. So in that sense, there's like an equality. Um, but it does seem to me that the Roman description of this wife renting principle of making children that way is much more I own her. Like you're not talking to her about it. She's not coming to me about the idea. Like you want to make a baby with this woman. I'm done making babies. I've had enough babies. I don't need any more. That's also very Apollonian. That's very Roman in the sense of it's a it's a feature of highly advanced civilizations that have symphonic, non-lyrical music and supreme courts and all this fancy stuff that the Spartans don't have, that they have childbirth control, that they have birth control, that they have family planning, that they because it takes 30 years to educate someone enough before they're even competent in such a complicated system. You want to be the third violinist in the string quartet by the time you're 6, you better know that that's what you're going to be studying and doing, practicing 8 hours a day or you're not gonna be that guy. Okay, this is very complicated, sophisticated stuff. The simplicity of Sparta, as opposed to that, it has its pros and cons. So just because we're talking about Lycurgus and Numa doesn't mean I'm saying this is ideal and this is garbage. I'm saying there's pros and cons here. I don't think this is ideal, by the way. Like, but my opinion on that isn't being expressed ever in this conversation. I'm not saying we should be like this or like this. I think we should be like the founding fathers and we should innovate a bit. But anyway, forget what I think. The point is, when we're comparing the two, this over here is so simple that, hey, let's make more babies. It's cool. They're going to go to the barracks if they live long enough to be the age of 7, and they're going to have more soldiers, and they're all a part of stuff that helps. Whereas in Rome, in a very Apollonian feature, Apollo had one sister, two deities. Their parents were made fun of by another set of deities who had 14 kids. And so Apollo's parents asked him and his sister to go and punish them, and they slew the 14 children from the sky with arrows. That's the mythopoetic way of saying, why is it that in the country, if you've got a cottage, hey, let's have another baby. In 2 or 3 years, they're helping pick tomatoes and they're cute and they're awesome and they're a part of the whole thing and it's wonderful. And if you're in the city, it's like, oh my God, this kid has decades of education and this is a big burden. It's like in the city, everybody does one thing. In the village, in the place where Pan plays music, as opposed to Apollo, you have uh you make your own soap once a year. I know how to do this. It's really fun. I moved out into the woods. It's a homesteading project. You make your own soap. You've got lye and chemistry, and you know about bases and acids. Took some chemistry classes, right? And you get to teach the kids. And look, it rose in its temperature and got hot when we mixed these two room temperature things. And this is what's happening. And on the molecular level, I can draw it out. You get to talk about all of that, and it's beautiful and wonderful and fun. And you make your own soap. If you live in the city, you buy your soap for 56 cents at the bodega down the street because you do one thing. This is all very complicated. Likewise, when you're having kids in a system like that, it's a kind of a burden. Whereas so it just looks different. And so that's where you get your family planning from and all of that. It seems like in the Roman realm, their idea of renting wives for the purposes of making children is very much I've already decided I've had enough kids. You wouldn't have that attitude if you were more Spartan. If you're Spartan, you just want to have more kids because we need more soldiers and we're looking for in a eugenics kind of way or progenics or whatever the words those are. But like Lycurgus said, how come we worry about the breeding of dogs and horses? Why don't we decide who would make a healthy kid? So they're trying to do it for that reason, but the more kids, the merrier. The individual Roman household is saying, look, I've got enough kids. They've got to go through their education, send them to boarding school. That costs money. But look, I make a lot of money because I'm doing one thing and I'm doing it really well and whatever. I'm in this industry. That's an Apollonian way of living. So you say, I'm done making kids, but if you guys want kids, you can buy her from me, rent her from me. The women, the question we're asking is, in which of these are the women equal? The women are definitely property in that Roman perspective. It's not clear that they were property any more so or any less than the Spartan men in the other one. The Spartan wife comes to her husband, says, this dude over here, he's working out really well. He's able to recover from injury really well. I think he'd make a good, strong Spartan baby. What do you think? He'd go, huh, you're right. He would. Like, she's coming up with that idea. It's not, hey, honey, I rented you to Phil. You know what I mean? There's definitely a women are property thing in the Roman more than in the Spartan, but it's hard to see from our perspective. But we can also take the record of the other Greeks who are like, why are you all listening to your wives in Sparta? We don't do that anywhere. So it's hard to parse out all the lenses we have to look through to understand what this was like in the context of the other cultures. But I could be wrong about all of that, and I'd love to hear some other arguments about this. It's definitely complicated and far away from the way we view things, where women are created in the image of God and are 100% the exact same thing as men in that way. And they have to say, I do. It's voluntary marriage for them. Remember, the Romans, it's the Sabine women. you know, that's what Numa has to come in and deal with the fact that this people is made up of you just kidnapped a bunch of women and brought them back and made families with them. All right. That's the Sabines were the other people. Now we've got to make you work together and you're all on the same page. And there's not like this, right? That's what Numa has to deal with. So and the women were sobbing, sobbing, sobbing buckets of tears. If you ever if you ever watch Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, it's a great old musical. It's a really great old musical, and in it, they read about this story about the Sabine women, and because they're living out in the mountains and in the woods like I'm living, and they're living this kind of life, they sing a song about like, "Hey, what if we kidnapped women and then we had happy marriages after that?" It's it's a silly song. It's a fun song. Anyway, these with the young men from the house go out, with thighs that show and robes that fly about. So everybody else in Greece, everybody else in Rome is looking at the Spartans like, what are you doing? We hide our women. They're like precious little birdies. We don't want them to fly away. We keep them hidden from the vision of other people. Yours are striding out there. I can see their thighs. I can see their thigh. They're basically naked, and they were naked when they exercised, just like the men. He gave them all exactly the same life in that regard, right? So the poets can't even really bring themselves to point that out, or we're translating thighs, but it's really pudenda. We'll have to look into that. But even the poets are just saying, like, I can see their thighs, man. Like, what are you doing? Are they not precious to you? Are you not protecting them? Aren't they a thing that you want to hoard away and hide? It's like that's not a bad view, right? We're not arguing one view is better than another. We're looking at the differences between these two historically. And it's like the poets are saying, what is going on in Sparta? They're marching unashamed and naked, and the men are exercising naked and the women are, and they're not even like, if you did that in Rome, you'd have an orgy, right? You couldn't do that in Rome. In Sparta, they're barely ever having sex. Like they have to get away from their barracks, and it's shameful. They get kind of made fun of, like, "Oh, you went to see your wife again for 15 minutes." Like, "Oh, you had an hour and a half with your wife, I see. Oh, that's the third time this month, huh, Mr. Softy Pants over here." Like you had to deal with that shit. It was very hard to have sex in that way, and it was within the confines of marriage, and it's hard for us to understand what it was like because we're like, "Wait a minute, they're exercising naked near the men, and, like, what's going on here?" So we have to talk about this a lot to say, like, what is going on in Sparta is very unique and weird and probably not imitatable by anybody else, um, but a miracle that it could exist and last for 500 years. For in fact, the skirts of the frock worn by unmarried girls were not sewn together at the lower part. Usually the outfits are like, look, we're not going to let anybody see your vagina. Okay. We're all wearing robes, but yours are getting like it's like the thing you put with a baby with the snaps or whatever. That's how the robes for unmarried maidens would be. Yeah, you got a dress, but I don't know what that's called today. I don't know women's fashion, but leotard or whatever it is that you've seen shorts with a skirt over the top of it. It's kind of something like that. For in so that's normal, but not for the Spartans. They're like, "Hey, what am I ashamed of my body? I'm here to exercise and work out and be ready for anything." Remember, Leonidas says, "Oh, you wonder why we don't have walls around our city? You see this woman over here? You see her child? You see this man over here? This young lady? Those are our walls. Come and see what you find. That's our wall. Bring it on." So the women are very much at least defensive soldiers, if not the one, maybe they don't go out on campaigns to put down other things, but they're very much defensive soldiers. And so their relationship to their body was codified in these poems and laws that this radical thing. You make that a law today. Hey, everybody go around naked. It ain't going to be harmonious 500 years of things working out well. That's the thing I'm trying to underline. Hey, we're not reading what Lycurgus did and said, "Oh, let's just implement that principle." It's like, wait a minute. We got to understand what is happening here and what context makes this make sense. For in fact, the skirts of frozen are sewn together at the lower part, but used to fly back and show the whole bare thigh as they walked. I think that's what's happening with the translation is pudenda is visible from time to time as they're walking. The thing is most distinctly, I mean, this is also true of in the Hebrew text when it says Abraham he put his hand under his thigh, it was testicles. It was like swear on my balls, basically. And in the King James version of translating these ancient texts, they use the word thigh a lot. So I imagine that's what's going on here. I didn't look into it, but we could. Okay. Clearly, the context of the words that we're reading is that's what they're talking about. Okay, so what a weird way to live. The thing is most distinctly given by Sophocles. She, also the young maid, whose frock no robe yet o'er it laid, folding back leaves her bare thigh free. Hermione. Similar to the poem in Ovid's Metamorphoses describing Daphne, right? She's running through the woods and her thigh is visible. And all right, anyway, something wild. But the rest of the Greeks are like, "What is going on?" Well, for good reason. You implement those habits here, those customs here, everything is chaos forever, and we're probably not a city in a year, right? Like, this ain't no way to live unless you've constituted something like Lycurgus did, which is just so dramatically different, and the things that people are looking for are different, and the way they're seeing themselves are different, and the harmony they're trying to abide by is different. But, every other Greek is constantly ridiculing them. Like, "What is going on in Sparta? Make fun all you want, but when the invaders come, when the war is happening, you know who shows up and who settles it all real quickly with the least amount of bloodshed, and it's them." But in the meantime, how are these men and women going to deal with the fact that, like, do you just hate women? Are you just parading them naked to use them as property? It's like that's not happening. That decadence is not what's being described in Sparta. There might be an element of that demonic idea in the Rome, maybe an element in the sense that you could imagine a a type of person giving expression to something horrible like that in the Roman picture. But in Sparta, what's being described is not that, but it sounds like it would be. We're not Spartans, we're not living in Sparta, right? So when we hear about the way their custom was, it's and all the Greeks living at the time were like, what is going on here? You're not valuing the ladies. There's no protection, like protection, the Spartans would say. Protection. You need protection. See what you can do with our women. Come on. You're gonna be the one who needs protection. That's really the response. It is. It's a different idea, but it's confusing and frustrating. So we're talking about it at great length to sort it out, I guess. And so their women, it is said, were bold and masculine. Don't you care? Numa clearly cares about feminine virtue here. Nope, not the Spartans, it seems. Or maybe they have a different idea about what that would be. The female of the species is more deadly than the male, and so maybe, just maybe, they have a different way of appreciating the feminine that might be greater than some of the other Greeks. Okay, overbearing to their husbands in the first place. This they always made fun of them for this. Why are your women telling you what to do and you're listening like you're obeying them? It's not like they were dominatrixes or something. They were equals, but like no woman in Rome is going to be like, husband, you're an idiot. You should do this instead of that. The Spartan women could say that. Um, Absolute mistresses in their houses, total, that's their kingdom, giving their opinions about public matters freely. Oh, this is being written in 75 AD. It's like they're just saying what they think. That's actually a chaotic thing. Our politics are pretty wild right now because every man is acting like a woman saying any goddamn thing he wants. You're a pedophile. You're a this, you're a that. Before women had the right to vote in this country, you'd be challenged to a duel. Oh, you're gonna say that about me? Let's go. Noon. Pistols. You can say that. Let's see if you're gonna put your body where your mouth is. You don't just say shit like that. There's a code of honor. But if your politics is, I can say anything, if it manipulates people and they start thinking like, "Ooh, I'm gonna look at you differently now that that was said, even if I don't think it's true, then I could get my political thing." That's how politics is working in the country right now. And you're all part of it and you're enjoying the hell out of it. All the gossip, all the everything. Let's see how much that chaos can feed off of a dead old order before it's completely gone. Tick tock. We could turn this around if we pay attention to what matters. Okay. Absolute mistresses of their houses, giving their opinions about public matters freely. In Sparta, you can do that. In Sparta, the other Greeks are saying, how is it that women are allowed to talk about people? This is a lawyer and he's trying to become a leader. And this one says, I should be the general. And the woman is expressing her opinion out front of everybody, expecting them to laugh at the guy. And it does because she's witty and she's paying attention and understands how all of this works. The rest of the Greeks were like, what? What? Again, them being naked wouldn't work where we are. Them talking nakedly wouldn't work where we are either. But that's because Sparta is very different. And don't think that these things don't apply to us too. And speaking openly even on the most important subjects. But the matrons, under the government of Numa, still indeed received from their husbands all that high respect and honor which had been paid them under Romulus as a sort of atonement for the violence done to them. Remember, they were captured Sabines. Nevertheless, great modesty was enjoined upon them. All busy intermeddling forbidden. All busybodying is forbidden. Sobriety insisted on. You're not allowed to drink. Ladies, come on. You're special. You're precious. It's uglier to see a drunk woman than a drunk man. Don't know why, but it is. There's something worse about this. We're trying to protect you, and we don't want to get rid of the masculine desire to protect and treat like this as precious, but that means you don't get to be like the Spartan women, which is crazy, and run around doing hard exercise and challenging people to a fight if they come to your town from some other place. Like, yeah, bring it on, buddy. Let's see what happens. You don't have any idea. It's like, wait, that's not womanly. We want these women protected. They're valuable. All right. Sparta was weird. That's the conclusion. Sparta was weird back then. Sparta is weird at all times, but Sparta worked, and that's a weird thing for us to think about. You can't have Sparta by implementing any of these principles. You have to wonder how it could work at all. Romulus was a sort of atonement for the violence done to them, enjoined upon them, all busy intermeddling forbidden, sobriety insisted upon, and silence made habitual. Like, ladies, we got a bunch of warring, stupid men here. Let's just try to calm them down and maybe don't add anything to the conversation. That's Numa's attitude. Is like people need to be calmed down. Again, the harp is tuning one thing down, it's tuning another thing up. Lycurgus versus Numa. Wine they were not to touch at all, nor to speak, except in their husband's company, even on the most ordinary subjects, kind of Islamic. So that once when a woman had the confidence to plead her own cause in a court of judicature, the Senate, it is said, sent to inquire of the oracle whether the prodigy did portend. What the prodigy did portend. And indeed, their general good behavior and submissiveness is justly proved by the record of those that were otherwise. We can read that story later since it's not going to finish it. But like a woman spoke up in her own defense in a courtroom, and the entire Roman policy was like, um, dispatch some riders to a temple where there's an oracle who can tell us what the hell this means. Is the entire city about to be destroyed? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is this a curse from the gods? A woman spoke in the position of having a legal defense in a legal matter. Even like of all the times you should have a right to speak, you have greater free speech rights there than you do in in public in a lot of ways. Like there's certain things that don't apply. You get to say. In that context, she speaks, and they're like, is this the end of the world?" Okay. So I think my original judgment that in Sparta, women were not thought of as property in the way that in Rome, they are definitely second-class citizens here. But also, again, we're not trying to read it in a modern feminazi kind of way. Like they saw women as precious and worth defending. They saw women as like, this is something I want to hide away and keep safe and not let everything bad thing in the world happen to it. In Sparta, it was like, bitch, get your clothes off and get out there and start lifting weights and practice throwing spears. It's like in two different ways, the valuing of women is very different between these two. And we're not endorsing one of them or saying either of them was ideal at all or anything like that. We're just trying to figure out what's going on and understand it properly. And they're both pretty weird to us. All right. So once a woman had the confidence to plead her own cause in court, is that we got to figure out what's going on here. And indeed, their general good behavior and submissiveness is justly proved by the record of those who that were otherwise. Right. So the exceptions proved the rule. All right. As the Greek historian records in their annals, the names of those who first unsheathed the sword of civil war, or murdered their brothers, or were parricides, or killed their mothers. So the Roman writers report it is as the first example that Spurius Carvilius, we're going to be Latin, Carvilius divorced his wife, being a case that never before happened in the space of 230 years. There are documents you can read about legal trials and stuff. They're really fun to read. We'll have a chance to do that one day. Uh, So, like, this never happens, okay? So, if you're worried about women murdering people, women of the Roman times, it happened once every 2.5 centuries. Like, we got a lot of police to beat up the men, but all the people in jail are the men. And who could imagine a woman doing something like that? Now, of course, in our time, most of the people in jail are men, as they should be. And we have systems to go after men, as we should. But the percentage of women willing to do the types of things we have to imprison you for is higher with us than with the Romans. I'm not making conclusions. Like, I'm not with the Spartans. I'm just saying we're trying to evaluate what's going on here. Okay. The Roman trade reports of 730 years from the foundation of the city, and that one Thalaea, the wife of Pinarius, had a quarrel, the first instance of the kind, with her mother-in-law, Gagania, or Jagania, in the reign of Tarquinius Superbus. Like, literally, it's like, okay, out of 1,000 years, we've got this trial where a woman did a crime and this one over here. Like, this is so rare. So successful was the legislator in securing order and good conduct in the marriage relation. Okay, so whatever's going on, this is the evidence Plutarch is presenting. Whatever's going on in the marriages in Rome, the women weren't so discontent that there was chaos happening. That's all he's saying. He's saying, like, the women seem to get along with it pretty well. If women are not happy with something, you'd imagine there'd be a lot of problems coming from a lot of directions, right? Women are so rarely discontented. And now, of course, there's another way that you can make people never murder anybody. You can terrorize them to the point where they're just beaten up so much they can't imagine doing it. It's possible that's what's going on with Rome, but it's also possible because what is man going to do? Hold back the ocean and the tide with his hand? Like, you're not controlling women. Um, so it's quite possible that the women seemed as evidence. He's just saying as evidence of the fact that very rarely are they ever getting in quarrels with their mother-in-laws. He's saying, like, there was a case where there was a fight between a woman and her mother-in-law that happened once under this king. Like, we have the record of all the laws where women had to be in court for anything. Like, it happened twice. That's what he's saying. He's like, okay, apparently, whatever this is, it's working for the women. They're not protesting. That's him as a historian, right? He's not saying, I think we should treat women this way. He's saying, I think they were treating women in a way where the women weren't protesting. They seem to be getting along pretty well and not poisoning their souls with murder. So there must be something going on to it, I guess. Their respective, he's letting the women vote for it in that way, anyway, empirically, in retrospect. Okay. Their retrospective regulations for marrying the young women are in accordance with those for their education. Lycurgus made them brides when they were of full age and inclination for it. Remember how careful Lycurgus was like, yo, dude, there's an age where she's really, really fully ready to be a woman. You stay the fuck away from them until they're at that point. That was a Lycurgian thing. Intercourse, where nature was thus consulted, would produce, he thought, love and tenderness. Right? I mean, 'cause you can look at some of these civilizations where it's like they're getting married at 14. Lycurgus is like, fellas, go fucking work out. And you're barely ever having sex because you're hardly ever getting married. You might be fucking each other a lot. We saw a bit of that in the text. But when it comes to dealing with the women, this is something where, like, stay the fuck away from the women. That's really kind of what it was. There was a lot of awe and respect for the women in Sparta that wouldn't be presently apparent to us if we just read about the way they're exercising naked and doing warlike stuff and all of that. It's like, what's going on? Um, but Lycurgus is like making a lot of laws that are not treating women like they're delicate flowers that need to be protected, but also saying, the point of all of this is to be prepared for war. So go work out. Intercourse, where nature was thus consulted, would produce, he thought, love and tenderness instead of the dislike and fear attending an unnatural compulsion. and their bodies also would be better able to bear the trials of breeding and of bearing children. In his judgment, the one end of marriage. We might say common sense. I'm just pointing out Lycurgus is making these points in a milieu where they need to be made, where they're not being made in other city states. There's something more Muslim about the Roman picture and about a lot of that region, and there's something okay about buying a 14-year-old bride over there still today. Some regions. I'm not talking I shouldn't say still today in that that's not uncommon. Lycurgus is saying, "Oh, fuck all of you." He's saying, "Fuck that." And he made laws, and they all followed those laws and were very, very, very happy about it, and their women were the sorts of creatures who weren't afraid of anything. They were like, "Yo, buddy, look at me. I'm an adult woman Spartan. Fucking pay attention to what I'm saying right now. You're fucking up." And they said, "Oh god, you're right. I am." Like, they listened to each other. There was a real kind of equality that you wouldn't imagine if you imagine this sort of way of applying some of their habits in other contexts. Okay. The Romans, on the other hand, gave their daughters in marriage as early as 12 years old or even under. Again, it's property. They're selling to someone who can buy. You got a kid, you got to figure out how to do the money thing. That's what's happening here. The women are property in that sense. They seem, as Plutarch says, to be okay with the system. I think the only reason I'm not offering a torrent of objection and criticism of it is I feel like we already all know it, but maybe I ought to explicitly say, like, nice of you to say so from the outside. It's possible the women are so terrified that they never commit crimes, not that they're so happy that they never feel a reason to argue with their mothers-in-law except once in a while, right? I thought I didn't have to say that, but let me just point out that there's another way of looking at this than just saying, "Well, they seem to be happy, they're not committing murder." It's like, well, they're happy in their black bags. Possibly. They do seem to be viciously enforcing those rules on their younger girls, but is that the sign that you're happy with the way you were raised or unhappy? Early as 12 years or under, thus the thought their bodies alike and minds would be delivered into the future husbands pure and undefiled. We've got some attitudes that we're familiar with as we've gotten to know our Muslim brothers a little bit better from certain regions. I'm not picking on everybody. I'm not even making a final judgment on the right way to live. We're just describing the differences here. The way of Lycurgus seems the more natural, with a view to the birth of children. The other, looking to a life to be spent together, is more moral. Okay, so you've heard this idea before. Could be a lot of truth to it. Again, I'm not saying which of all these crazy ideas is right. We're saying our people is a totally different thing, and to have ideas on how to constitute us, you can't just adopt any of these things. But we're going to look at these different ways of thinking and how they're being applied. The happiest people in our society who are married, or most of the happiest people are married their high school sweetheart, were in a tight religious Catholic environment, had sex with each other and nobody else their entire lives, and grew up together and made a lot of babies and are super happy, and everybody knows it. That's the point. That's why he's saying is more moral. Is it more moral to be okay with selling a 12-year-old to somebody and say, "Hey, well, you'll definitely always have just each other"? That is not something that is easy to say. I'm not saying my opinion on any of this, but you can imagine how much I want to vomit while thinking about certain things. Maybe you can't imagine. I don't want to go into a tirade about it, but god damn. God fucking damn all of you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Trying very much not to give my opinions on these things as we try to look carefully at the different ways of thinking, but okay. The Christian development seems to be an improvement. Having an adult, Lycurgus came up with this idea, having an adult fully developed in every possible way, woman, like really developed physically, energetically, like not just, oh, she's got titties now, but like, you know what I'm saying? Excuse me, this is what we have to talk about. I'm not trying to be coarse or crude, but fully like she can stand up to a man. You know the difference between like the mate, like before getting married, before having sex in Sparta, you weren't a you weren't a blushing bride in the same way. You know what I mean? Like there were no blushing brides in Sparta. There were virginal women, perhaps. Who knows what the women are doing with each other over there, while the men are clearly doing stuff with each other. We read about that. But there are women who have not been with a man, but not maidens, right? There's a different thing. It's like it's weird because there's archetypes, maiden and matriarch, and there's all sorts of ways that you can. They're not all sorts. There's 7 archetypes of the feminine, but in Sparta there seems to be this like, I'm ready to get married now. I'm ready to be sent to war now. I'm ready to have children now, all being the same thing from the fully adult feminine woman. It's like, I'm ready to get married now means I'm ready to go to war now. I'm ready to risk death by torture to bring life into the world and hopefully bring about a good Spartan for the citizenry, for the civilization. That is, you went through training. Remember how much training they all had to go through to just be in the level of you can be sent to war now? The mirror image of that is happening with the women. So if you get married, that's the only time you're having sex with a woman. If it at that point as a Spartan, and you have to work really hard to get with her, and she has to contrive. Remember, she's like figuring out ways to be like, "Hey, the guests have left, and I could run into him at this point." But they got to work hard to even be together to have sex, and then it's back to your separate realms again. But also, the man is marrying a woman in more ways than like it's he's marrying his equal. He's that's what I'm trying to say. He's marrying his equal. It's taking a long time for him to get to marriageable age and her to get to marriageable age. And in the Lycurgian system, he's marrying someone who can stand up to him, who can give him what for. All right. There's an equality there. It's not dominatrix shit. We're not inverting things in that way, but it's very much Lycurgus is looking at that balance. And it's coming out that he's saying, okay, women are warriors. They're giving birth to children. You die easily doing that. Men, show that you're not as afraid of dying. Live your entire life to do that, and maybe you can have a wife. The Romans are more like looking at the Muslim systems, or many of them. I'm not saying all of them. I'm sorry to be a little cartoonish in that, but the Romans, I find the system a little harder to look at. However, the rules which Lycurgus drew up for superintendents of children, I didn't know we'd be talking about all this, but okay. Their collection into companies, their discipline and association, as also their exact regulations for their meals, exercises, and sports argue Numa no more than an ordinary lawgiver. Okay, we notice that. There's revolutions happening in the Spartan way of doing things. Numa is a very wise man who's making good regulations. Now, he did have a vision for a higher, let's get them in the habits of oriented towards the divine, which right now they're just looking to fight and conquer things. So there was that thing, but it's very much like this is normal law. You can't rape, you can't murder, you can't do like whatever. Numa left the whole matter simply to be decided by the parents' wishes or necessities. He might, if he pleased, make his son a husbandman or carpenter. Yeah, they can sell their sons as well, coppersmith or musician, as if it were of no importance for them to be directed and trained up from the beginning to one and the same common end. Right. It's normal. In other words, it's normal life with well-written laws that lasted a while in Rome. Sparta is, what the heck is this? Are you from Mars? Like literally. What it's totally revolutionary in every element of life. Okay, or as though it would do for them to be like passengers on shipboard, brought thither each for his own ends and by his own choices. Much more democracy and plurality and colorfulness and things going on in Rome. The Spartans are about one thing. But it lasted a lot longer. United to act for the common good. That's not the only way of judging if something's better. Uniting to act for the common good only in time of danger upon occasion of their private fears, in general, looking simply to their own interest. We may forbear indeed to blame common legislators, who may be deficient in power or knowledge. But when a wise man like Numa had received the sovereignty over a new and docile people, was there anything that would better deserve his attention than the education of children. He's saying, look, Lycurgus revolutionized everything. Numa seems not to even really be paying attention to that like it matters at all. That seems to be a major flaw in the whole Numian thing. Maybe Plutarch has hit on the flaw for the reason why it didn't last longer. You can't just show off as adults that you think you're doing things the right way. You got to give the education to the kids, and maybe you didn't put enough thought into that, is what he's saying. The training up of the young. Lycurgus put infinite thought into that, not to contrari contrari contrariety contrariety and discordance of character, but to the unity of the common model of virtue, to which from their cradle they should have been formed and molded. One benefit among many that Lycurgus obtained by his course was the permanence which it secured to his laws. The obligation of oaths to preserve them would have availed but little if he had not, by discipline and education, infused them into the children's characters and imbued their whole early life with a love of his government. Obviously, that was very clear as we read it. The result was that the main points and fundamentals of his legislation continued for about 500 years, like some deep and thoroughly ingrained tincture, retaining their hold upon the nation. But Numa's whole design and aim, the continuance and peace, the continuance of peace and goodwill on his death, vanished with him. No sooner did he expire his last breath, then the gates of Janus's temple flew wide open, and as if war had indeed been kept and caged up within those walls, it rushed forth to fill all Italy with blood and slaughter. And thus that best and justest fabric of things was of no long continuance, because it wanted that cement. It lacked, it needed. It wanted that cement which should have kept all together, education. What then? So this is his ultimate judgment of the comparison of Numa and Lycurgus is Lycurgus did something that lasted because he cared about not just constituting the people, but caring about the education of the young, that they could be brought up in that identity. And Numa just didn't pay attention to that issue. What then, some may say, has not Rome been advanced and bettered by her wars? Maybe just love it. Still not Numaean, right? Even if you want to justify it and say, hey, it's great, be a warlike people. It's not Numa's legacy that's being expressed there, if that's what you want to do. We're studying Numa here to see, what does it mean to be a good lawmaker or constitutionalist? A question that will need a long answer. If it is to be, one, to satisfy men who take the better to consist in riches, luxury, and dominion, rather than in security, gentleness, and that independence which is accompanied by justice. We have a comparison of two very different ways of living, obviously. It's open for debate, he's saying. I hopefully, as I've been trying to help us to see both of these while talking about it, I'm not endorsing one or either of these things, right? Like, we're trying to understand it. It's up for debate. All of it is always, because even if you had a perfect walled garden paradise right now, things are going to shift and you got to keep open for debate and how you're going to adjust. So none of this is an endorsement of any of these ways of living, but boy, is it inspiring to think that you could be that careful a thinker to try to gently, maybe carefully adjust the way people live until they become a people that are thriving and happy. However, it makes much for Lycurgus that after the Romans had deserted the doctrine and discipline of Numa, their empire grew and their power increased so much, whereas so soon as the Lacedaemonians fell from the institutions of Lycurgus, they sank from the highest to the lowest state. I don't know how you can say that that's to Numa's credit if what they did was leave what Numa told them to do and then thrived. What? What? This has to be to the credit. Oh, okay, good. It's for the credit of Lycurgus. Yeah. Okay, good. It's not until they leave the laws of Lycurgus that things fall apart. And after foretelling their supremacy over the rest of Greece, were themselves in danger of absolute extirpation. Yeah, things went really, really badly for the Spartans after 500 years of awesomeness for them from their perspective, because they lived and died for it. after they gave up on the Lycurgian way of being. But things fell apart immediately with Numa. Thus much, meantime, was peculiarly single and almost divine in the circumstances of Numa, that he was an alien and yet courted to some and accepted a kingdom. Courted to come and accepted a kingdom, the frame of which, though he entirely altered, yet he performed it by mere persuasion and ruled a city that as yet had scarce become one city without recurring to arms or any violence, such as Lycurgus used, supporting himself by the aid of the nobler citizens against the commonalty, but by mere force of wisdom and justice established union and harmony amongst all. Excuse me, am I just reading every sentence like I'm having a brain aneurysm? Did we not see that Numa worked in the text that we read to make allegiances with people and have their arms ready to take over, and that Lycurgus wanted to persuade? Lycurgus, am I reading this backwards? Thus much, meantime, was peculiarly single and almost divine in the circumstances of Numa, that he was an alien and yet courted to come and accept a kingdom, the frame of which, though he entirely altered, yet he performed it by mere persuasion and ruled a city. While he's ruling, it's certainly heavenly, right? While Numa is ruling, things are definitely heavenly. And it's nice to end on that note. But this judgment between the two, um, there was something certainly more heavenly and spiritual about Numa's civilization. Harder to maintain, perhaps. Maybe he could have worked on the education, but maybe it's just hard to maintain. Maybe what you need, maybe the illustration of the Numa story is you need to have the wisest, most spiritual ruler, and then you all need to just be ruled by him. It's like a benevolent despot. It's endorsement of that monarchy. And and there was so much liberality and so much care for attention to the gods and sacrificing properly and all of that. That's not what the Romans were like at all after Romulus. I mean, Numa's the second king and he's forming them into this other thing, but he doesn't last. And he's saying that he did it all by persuasion. He's certain both of them used persuasion a lot, and neither of them ruled like a tyrant. So I'm just not sure why I'm seeing this as a comparison here. Obviously, Plutarch is more careful with his words than I am in my misunderstanding of them, but according to come to accept the kingdom, the framework was ruled by the cities and scarce become one city without recurring to arms or any violence, such as Lycurgus used, supporting himself by the aid of the nobler citizens against the commonalty. I think he's just complaining for the helots' sake again. But by mere force of wisdom. Okay, yes, that's exactly what he's doing, and that's a completely fair comparison there. Remember, Numa is dealing with these Romans and saying, "Stop raping and pillaging all of the little villages and people around you." He's taking them from, "Hey, we live off of that. We'll go steal all our stuff, bring it back here, have a party." Stop it. And he's turning them into a people that aren't doing that at all, where you actually have to go to priests before you're allowed to have a fight with anybody. They're the judiciary, and their job is to see, is there any way that words can settle whatever this dispute is? And only when they say, we have tried every use of words, only when they, the priests, say words aren't going to work anymore, do they have to let go of the matter, and the people who go to war can decide to go to war. All right. But he's taking a people that are not like that. They're subsisting off of pillaging and going on raids and stuff, and he's like, no, that's not a good life. Let's pray and sacrifice. Let's sacrifice grain instead of blood. Let's stop being so bloody, right? So he's doing a miraculous, like, it's as if the clouds opened up or descended and the heavens were just right there in that area for as long as Numa was ruling, and then as soon as he was gone, bam, all those bad elements were still there and it was over. So it is fair to point out that Lycurgus is basically building a system that says, okay, those slave people, yeah, they work for you. You're not going to work and make food. They're going to work. It's your property, but they're the slaves. They do all of that work. We're going to go do gymnastics. We're going to go work out on the art of war. We're going to go do all of that stuff. So they are living off on other people in that sense, and, like her and Numa was not about anything like that, so fair enough. Great parallel. Okay, but mere force of wisdom and justice establish union and harmony amongst all. Okay, so we've read it to the end of a bit. Okay, so that took longer than I thought it would, and I talked a lot more than I thought. Sorry about that if that's a problem. But we've read through Lycurgus and we read through Numa, and last night there was a story about going to the stories. There's a lot of wisdom, and we might need to go to the people who are recording and coming up with stories that they're telling each other to make the people believe in myths that actually work and push them closer to the truth and all of that stuff. Our plan is to pay attention to this stuff because it's edifying and it might be the only way to stop collapse. Maybe. But what are all the stories telling? Only if God is gracious to you. You need that element in all of that. And it's in the stories, it's in the history, it's in the poetry and all of that stuff too. So let's get serious about what it means to think and care about these things and see if we can't discipline ourselves well enough for whatever political system will work for us in our time and our place. It's not going to be Sparta, it's not going to be Rome, but whatever does work for us has to be the product of people or gods or inspiration or anything that's taking into account all of these very complicated and difficult um complicated and difficult uh like people are complicated. The point of the Apollo story, let's wrap up with this. The point of the Apollo stories, they're infinitely complicated. They don't know themselves. They don't know the wickedness and I don't know the wickedness in my own heart, and what I've seen of it is way worse than I imagined. It's rough being a person. It's rough working with people. You know, you think I'm going to go and make a political system. Shut up. Shut up for 40 years. Please shut up. You don't know who you are. You don't know what you're dealing with, and you don't know what effect your influence is going to have and what wild, complicated feedback loops exist. You don't know. Lycurgus pulled something off. Let's read about what he did and how he did it. Let's pay attention. What did he do? He spent 20 years studying other countries' laws and talking to the wisest people he found in the legislatures and the priest class, I think, in those places before he dared say a word after he knew that that was the mission of what he had to do. Okay. And he said, before I start saying anything, I'm going to go do that for 20 years. Why don't you listen to some music? Some music that is symphonic, some music that is ordered so you can start to get in your stupid ape brain the picture of the idea of something of higher order of which you could be a part. Where instead of it's me, and I'm the biggest thing and I'm the most important principle, it's oh, look, it's multiple different notes and I'm needed and you're needed and we could be working in harmony and get that idea in dream form in your head through the imagistic way communication of art for 20 years while I go study. And when I come back, I'm going to write as little as possible. I'm going to make as few adjustments as possible. They're pretty revolutionary and dramatic changes. We look at them and can't understand how you could do that. The other Greeks looked at them and said, "What the hell is going on over there?" I mean, it was wild. It was crazy. It looked wild to the other Greeks, but the fact that it could be accomplished was wild, is what I'm saying. So, Numa, hey, we need to be a people. We're a bunch of Sabines and Latins, and we're fighting with each other, and we're not a people. Come, please, we beseech thee. I know you're sacrificing to the gods all day. I know you've decided to care about spiritual matters and nothing else. I know you're an aesthetic living out there, having polite conversation, trying to treat everyone you meet as a human, but mostly being concerned with your communication and relationship with the divine. But please come and help us. Numa comes to them and says, okay, no, first of all, I don't want to. And they beseech him and they beseech him, of course. We understand. But he comes eventually to do this. He says, okay, what needs to happen is you people need to be a people. So no more Roman food and Roman shoemaking and Sabine food and Sabine shoemaking. All shoemakers come together. You live in this area now and you work together. You have more in common with each other than you do with Sabine or Roman people of other guilds. become the shoemaker, work hard, learn from each other, innovate, communicate, be in community with each other with the commonality of shoemaking. You guys who are doing flute, you play the flute, you work on music, you do that together. You have more in common a Roman flute player and a Sabine flute player than a Roman flute player has with a Roman shoemaker. That's so he's using wisdom, he's systems over goals, organizing things and structuring it differently and saying, okay, and most of the laws have to do with you sacrificing properly, and that shouldn't be a burden. Have a party, eat a meal, but sacrifice properly. And this guy's in charge of making sure you do it right. You go to him and you say, am I bringing the grain properly? Is this the right way to sacrifice? We got to get you remembering there's something bigger than Phil. We got to get you remembering if you piss off the gods, you should be afraid. Fear of the gods. So both of these people are saying these people are a mess. And Lycurgus and Numa are saying, how do we, like a spiritual father, how do we use music and mythology and poetry to get them to raise their consciousness to something higher? Because what the hell else could I possibly do to help out a people if they don't have that? I'm going to write on clever law. I got an idea. Don't kill each other. It's either going to keep happening or they didn't need to be told it in the first place. Lycurgus and Numa are constitutionalists. They're helping to constitute a people. And so we'll have chances to read more things later.